Dungeon Hunter. Chapters 223 to 242. Chapter 223 to 225. Explosion. A familiar demon was collapsed against a wall. His whole body was covered with blood. His white face was even paler. If it wasn't for the rising of his chest, she would have thought he was dead. Yuun-hai caught her breath. Her mind was blank. Her hands shook as she formed fists. And she moved quickly. Please. The awakened. Among them, she was one of the best. Her hearing went beyond the limits of a human, so she could hear the sound of a beating heart from far away. But right now, she felt like an ordinary person. She couldn't hear or feel anything. Yuun-hai brought her ear to the man's chest. Dugan. Finally, she heard the sound of a heart beating. Ah! Yuun-hai shed tears of relief. She didn't know why the tears were emerging. There was just a vague feeling. At the same time, Yuun-hai was quickly able to recover her control. She looked around. There were traces of a disturbance. Dead demons. An assault. He was taken by surprise. She nodded. It was clear that the man had been attacked and fought back. Yes, he wasn't an easy opponent. All of his enemies were eventually slain. But the man himself was wounded and collapsed. It isn't over. It happened at least twice. Her mind was jolted awake. The traces in the surroundings didn't lie. It was obvious that he was assaulted several times but defeated them all. If that was the case, there might be another attack. Yuun-hai immediately lifted the man. It was like he was dead. The man was exhausted and Yuun-hai was unable to deal with any demons. However, the outside was filled with creatures. She didn't know if it was possible when alone, but they wouldn't be able to escape notice with two people. Hide in a safe place. That seemed to be the only way. Yuun-hai started walking. She hadn't experienced any obstacles when coming here. She was able to remember a place that seemed the most secure. The clock tower. The creatures couldn't easily approach the clock tower. It was a gamble. The clock tower had to be dangerous for the creatures to avoid it. Yuun-hai used all her strength to escape the underground area with the man. Yuun-hai moved quickly. She had memorized a map of Greenwich Observatory. Although the interior was renovated, the framework hadn't changed that much. This was the fastest and safest road. I have to treat him. The man's body was like a fireball. Once his stopped heart started to beat again, it burned like a flame. He was emanating such heat that Yuun-hai's back started to warm. It would be unlucky if there was a creature that detected heat. There seemed to be no other way. Yuun-hai looked around as much as possible. She used all her senses to try and determine the position of creatures in the area. Thanks to that, there was a small time delay. But she couldn't risk it. It was a situation where the man's life was threatened. It was the only way to move safely. The path to the clock tower felt very far. Fortunately, there weren't as many creatures in the castle as she thought. None of them were high-ranking. Sururik. After she had gone approximately halfway, Yuun-hai felt an incredible amount of magic power surrounding her. She turned her head and could see shadows coming up from the ground. She swallowed her saliva. The shadows found Yuun-hai and the man wrapped around her. Their intentions didn't seem good. The shadows seemed like a type of creature. It can't be helped. I have to fight. Yuun-hai carefully put the man down and pulled out her sword. But her sword was considerably damaged. It was due to the battle with Edward. Thanks to the treatment from the High Priest sisters, her stamina remained, but her weapon. It will be hard with this sword. What to do? She bit her lip. At that moment, the shadows turned into Yuun-hai. Doppelganger? They were similar but a little different. A doppelganger didn't appear in the form of a shadow. They stayed as the last creature they transformed into. I'll borrow these for a moment. Yuun-hai's gaze moved towards the man's waist. 2 swords. She pulled out both of them. One sword was black while the other one was golden and jeweled. Biddle. Yuun-hai stumbled the moment she grabbed both swords. Warning. Wrath and the Emperor's sword are looking at the user. The 2 swords have weak egos and will cause a strong repulsion force when used by the wrong user. Wrath and the Emperor's sword have temporarily accepted the user Yuun-hai. Yuun-hai regained her posture. The power she felt disappeared. Ego sword. Her eyes widened. An ego sword. She had heard of it, but this was the first time she had seen the real thing. She never heard of anyone having one, so she thought it was just imaginary. Yuun-hai quickly shook her head. Now wasn't the time. She had to move as quickly as possible to remove the shadows that looked like her. If she took too long, then other nearby creatures might join. The enemies also copied Yuun-hai's weapons. It seemed like they copied everything. It can't be. Yuun-hai thought despairingly. Pant, pant. Yuun-hai was sweating. She kept on panting. It felt like the world was turning and she wanted to sit down. But Yuun-hai used every bit of her willpower to move her feet. The shadows were persistent. They had already struck a few times and didn't know how to give up. Thanks to that, her pace was delayed. She knew how to ease this problem. She could give up the man. The goal of the shadows was the man. If she threw him away, then they would stop their pursuit. But she couldn't do that. Her heart cried out not to do that. She leaned against the wall. She peeked at the man's face. Despite being blood-soaked, his face looked comfortable. Did he know the current situation? However, the man had a different atmosphere than usual. Despite killing in cold blood, she could never hate his face. He seemed like a pure baby. Yuun-hai's mouth twitched. Yuun-hai believed in him, no matter what mask he used. Everyone had an unknown face. He didn't have to put on a mask. Hold on a little longer. Now, almost there, she could see the clock tower. There was only a bit more to go. If she walked 100 more steps, then she could enter the clock tower. Yuun-hai moved while holding on to hope. But she didn't make it far enough. Suruk. The shadows emerged again. Yuun-hai was sick and tired of them. No matter how many she killed and killed, they kept appearing from somewhere. They were like a curse. They wouldn't stop until they exterminated their target. Yuun-hai raised the swords again. She moved despite not being familiar with dual swordsmanship. To be exact, it felt like the two swords were telling her how to move. She listened to the sword's whispers and moved. And her movements closely resembled that man's. The skill, sword flow, passive, has been created. Strength and agility have increased by 2. You have become more sensitive to the sound of the swords. She didn't worry about the messages. Yuun-hai took a deep breath and quietly took an attack stance. She felt more pliant than before, so now it was time to deal with the shadows. Quack. The shadows surrounded Yuun-hai. Yuun-hai sliced the waist of the first clone. Yuun-hai soon forgot all tiredness. She only focused on killing the shadows. Nothing else mattered. The skill, trance, passive, has been created. All stats have increased by 2. When falling into a trance-like state, all stats will increase by 5. Was it due to following the man's movements? Or was it because the two swords were telling her the way? The messages continued rising. Right now, none of them entered Yuun-hai's eyes. Flop. Yuun-hai collapsed to the ground soon after defeating all the shadows. She had no stamina left. She didn't even have enough stamina remaining to flick a finger. Nearly there, her vision was becoming increasingly blurry. Yuun-hai reached out and grabbed the man's hand. If the shadows attacked again, then she wouldn't be able to do anything. Death. Her life would end along with the man's. It was at that moment. Lul tilde lululul tilde mirror. Mirror. Is Yi the prettiest in this world? Yes, tilde Yi is the best in the world. Omo. Really? Yi. Yuun-hai saw a small fairy holding a hand mirror and dancing in the clock tower. Huh? Ugly woman. And, Hyok, master. The fairy cried out in dismay after confirming the man's appearance. Pandemonium was persistent. I should have watched him more carefully. That was my fatal mistake. Thanks to the many surprise attacks, I was wounded and exhausted. I was able to do a lot of damage, but Pandemonium recognized my strength and prepared suitable troops. However, everything became faint after the fight was over. I heard a familiar voice, but I thought it was already too late. Too late. Master. NN. Don't die and leave Yi. Agu tilde KK. If Master dies, then Yi will go with you. Eng. Kahuhuhung. My ears hurt. Someone was wailing by my side. My mouth opened without me knowing. Noisy. Sniffle. Pyung. Master? Yi's snot-covered hand touched me. I got up with a slight frown and saw an entirely different place from where I last was. Yi. This is the clock tower? Yes. Yi moved, and the bad girl is tied up. Yi finished crying and placed her hands on her waist. Who, you know, that ugly girl. Yi doesn't remember her name. Her explanation was inadequate, but I was convinced that she was talking about Yu Un-hai. It was because I heard Yu Un-hai's voice in my dream. Where is Yu Un-hai now? That Tilda in the next room. Yi tied her down. Did that bad girl attack Master? I got up and headed to the next room. Oswin was standing in front of the door, guarding it. Your Majesty, are you okay? You came back. I received an urgent message from Fairy Nim stating that I should come back. By the way, Pandemonium is really terrible. Sending so many after your Majesty. Oswin had already determined that the opponent who drove me into the corner was Pandemonium. I entered the next room. I was able to see Yu Un-hai naked and bound to a chair. Fairy Nim insisted on doing this. I couldn't stop her. Oswin muttered a little bitterly. Yu Un-hai had helped me greatly when I fainted, but Yi was mistaken. She didn't know and tied Yu Un-hai up. I clicked my tongue as I entered the room. I unfastened the chains one by one, then caught Yu Un-hai before she fell and laid her down. Soon I took out a potion from my magic bag. Elixir. It was a potion that could heal someone as long as they weren't dead. I had confirmed some things. I drank the elixir after Pandemonium's surprise raid, but it wasn't that effective. It was clear that there was a relationship between transcendence and the effects of the elixir. Anyway, it wasn't necessary for me because it wasn't that effective. I poured the elixir into Yu Un-hai's mouth without any hesitation. Cough. Yu Un-hai started coughing. But I didn't stop pouring the elixir and Yu Un-hai was forced to drink it. The origin is damaged. It seemed like she had used all her magic power coming here. The elixir helped restore the origin of her magic power. I poured all the elixir and placed a hand on Yu Un-hai's chest. It was to help the circulation of magic power. There was the possibility of a side effect, so I filled the empty spaces with my magic power. I gently covered her with my magic power. I stayed in that position for about an hour. After finishing, I stood up. Go back. This isn't the place for you. That, Yu Un-hai called out from behind me, but I didn't stop. I honestly couldn't understand why she returned. I sent a glance to Oswin once outside of the room. Oswin nodded. Oswin brought Yu Un-hai far beyond the boundaries. My magic power recovered quickly. I stretched my neck from side to side. There was the sound of my bones and muscles relaxing. After that, I grabbed Wrath and the Emperor's sword and descended the clock tower. Master, I should stick to you. Yi immediately followed me, but I didn't pay her any attention. I have to look at the situation. It seemed like I had been collapsed for one day. In the meantime, many things had changed greatly. First of all, Ariel Diablo had dealt damage to Upa. She took advantage of the gap and reduced Upa's power by half. It was the same for the battle between Pandemonium and the Angels. Pandemonium turned a lot of his power on me and almost succeeded. There was a hole in his power and Hash counterattacked. Thanks to that, the battlefield became more chaotic. Pandemonium would have realized that his surprise attack failed. The Shadow Hunters were persistent. They weren't difficult opponents, but there were a lot of them. Besides, the puppet demons didn't die easily due to an ability to regenerate. I succeeded in destroying all of them, but had been injured. I knew that it was Yu Un-hai who brought me to the clock tower while I was unconscious. However, I didn't have room for gratitude. I couldn't understand why she had returned. It was a really risky tightrope. Victory and defeat will be determined in the near future. I need to use that gap. They would feel confident at the moment of victory. The winner would only be paying attention to the loser. If I used hope at that time, then I could do the most damage. Pandemonium's surprise raid was over. He was currently moving quickly to stop the Angels. If successful, half of his purpose would have been achieved by assassinating me. However, Pandemonium failed and was on the defensive. His army was now inferior to Upa and Ariel's. Only a terrible future waited for him. Pandemonium, you shouldn't have aimed for me. If he had kept that power to deal with the Angels, then he would have already won. It would have been Pandemonium's overwhelming victory. That would have been more profitable, but he failed. It was too late for him to regret it now. I headed back to the underground area. I was confident there would be no more raids. Once the moon rose again in the night sky, victory would be decided. Kuhuk, Ariel Diablo was kneeling on the ground. Her mouth was bloody and her whole body was a wreck. Upa was similar, but he had a little more room to move. You cowardly wretch. Ariel grinded her teeth together. She was able to break through and set a stage for reversal, but the absolute difference in numbers was too much. The Silver Knights eventually collapsed. The monsters gathered in that gap and cooperated to strike at Ariel. Since ancient times, all things yielded to a larger number. Ariel was strong, but her opponent was the same. As she kept fighting Upa and the creatures, her stamina became severely depleted. In the end, Upa succeeded in knocking Ariel down. Heck, damn bitch, this is my strength. Why do you keep going on about cowardice? In fact, Upa was really discomforted. Ariel had been slightly ahead after fighting for a few days and his wounds had accumulated. But the last person standing was Upa. Of course, he had received tremendous damage. His creatures had visibly reduced by hundreds of thousands. There were around 50,000 left? He also lost a considerable number of demons. I will kill you cleanly. It is time to end the unfortunate relationship between us. Upa and Ariel had an extremely bad relationship between them even in the demon world. Now it was finally time to break those chains. He was pleased. Upa couldn't help laughing. Ariel tried to raise her ivory sword. Most of her demons and creatures had died. Some were able to escape, but Ariel couldn't. Upa didn't care about the others and persistently struck Ariel. It was hard for her to escape. Still, she thought it was better to die fighting. The Demon King. She had the bloodline of a Demon King, but she couldn't always be the winner. Raise your weapon. Upa Bulanon. Aren't we friendly enough to have a small conversation? Ariel laughed at him. Upa didn't like being laughed at. Talking like that until the end. Come. I will kill you in the worst possible way. Upa summoned typhoons. There were dozens of them. His attitude showed that he wanted to finish everything at once. Soon they collided, and, at the same time, the whole world was covered in a white light. Pandemonium was attacking the Angel's main army. He didn't have enough troops to drag the melee out, so he decided to strike the enemy's base. But only underlings were present at the Angel's base. He killed the throne's angel, but the most important cherub wasn't there. Where did he go? Pandemonium frowned. Did the angels realize that he was coming? No, it couldn't be. His plan was perfect. He slowly surrounded the base with creatures. It was impossible to notice without being able to predict the future. If so, why did his plan fail? Why? For what reason? Pandemonium's mind started spinning quickly. Not only the cherub, but the major angels couldn't be seen. All the high-ranking angels had left their positions. Usually, this was confirmation of a defeat. But the angels were equal to him. He couldn't push them back that much. Why was it necessary for them to leave when there was a chance of winning? He thought about it for a long time. But an answer couldn't be determined. However, he soon realized why. The world turned bright. He was surrounded by a white magic power. This feeling, get the hell out, his instincts warned him. It was dangerous. The white light wasn't normal. But he was already one step too late. The light spread out for hundreds of kilometers around Greenwich Observatory. I was also swept up in the explosion. I didn't move because I needed to keep the Grand Dukes here. There were creatures keeping an eye on the clock tower. They checked many times to confirm that I was still here. It was a situation where I couldn't move. There was a danger that the Grand Dukes would notice something and escape if I left Greenwich Observatory. I needed to make the net stronger. I was still slightly injured from Pandemonium's attack. Now I needed to deceive them. A risky gamble. I had installed magic power boosters in Greenwich Observatory to amplify Hope's power. The range of the explosion would double and the destructive power would be stronger. In other words, a great number of demons and creatures would be destroyed right away. I need to be more certain. The range of Hope couldn't be too narrow. There was also the possibility of escaping through a scroll. If the destructive power wasn't what I imagined, then many could survive. So I made a gamble. It was a requirement when going on an adventure. I evacuated all the major creatures and Yi returned to the dungeon. The explosion of Hope would only affect me. Kwang. When the explosion happened, I was also on the battlefield. I was almost at the place where the Grand Dukes were when the world turned white. My skin started to gradually melt. The Grand Dukes felt the danger and quickly put up defenses, but the rest vanished in the blink of an eye. How great! My expression slightly distorted. Were my calculations wrong? Even though most of my magic power was restored, the explosive strength of Hope was beyond imagination. My skin was melting. Not many would survive in the aftermath of this explosion. I was closer to hope than others and felt the effects more strongly. It was a little bit dangerous for me. Yu-Un-hai looked at the white flash from a distance. His Majesty will be safe. Oswin was next to her. The two of them were traveling on white. They had moved for half a day and barely escaped the scope of the explosion. I don't have a good feeling. Again, can't we go back? His Majesty wanted me to take you to the original location. I have to follow that order. Oswin spoke gently. Although he now had the terrible appearance of a creature, he was originally a human. He was a skillful blacksmith who dealt with iron. It was unfortunate that the Hell Monarch noticed him, but he didn't completely forget his human mind. By the way, you are really a stupid woman. Why did you come back? Thank you for bringing His Majesty back, but aren't you human? He said something. He is our hope. I came back to verify if he is that hope. Yu-Un-hai replied without any hesitation. She had gone over that answer in her mind several times. Oswin closed his mouth. Then he opened it again. Is he your hope? Yes, I guess so. He is humanity's last hope. Nobody else knows it. Huh, a human still thinks that despite knowing His Majesty's true nature? Then what will you do next? I don't know. Everything is confusing. However, I feel sorry for him knowing that he is surrounded by enemies. Yu-Un-hai sympathized with the man. She didn't know why, she just felt sorry for him. Oswin was dumbfounded. He thought that this woman was crazy. Then what about staying by His Majesty's side? Huh? The seal of a slave. Then His Majesty will give you some credit. Oswin threw out those words. In fact, Oswin knew that His Majesty, or Randolph Brigzeal as she knew him, tended to open up a little more when there was a contract. It was because he was sure that person would stay at his side. I understand. I'll do it. You will regret it. It is fine as long as it will benefit the world. Getting closer to him will help out a lot. Huh. A totally genius idea. It is so bizarre that it is genius. Oswin was filled with admiration. Yu-Un-hai gave him a pained smile. Will he be okay? Believe in him. Oswin replied concisely. A heavy silence returned. Soon the explosion stopped and the white light faded. My eyes were ringing. My senses felt shallow. My vision was blurred and my whole body was stinging. It was the aftermath of the explosion. My magic power has evaporated. I shook my head. Of my restored magic power, only 2% was remaining. This was just enough to sustain my flesh. It was a testament to the enormous magic power that went into protecting my body. Of course, I didn't have that much magic power remaining before I turned and searched the surroundings. There were craters all over the place. The holes were deep. The clouds in the sky were cleared. The creatures around me had evaporated. I couldn't see even one bone. All the corpses were gone. There weren't even the remnants of high-class creatures left behind. How great! I clicked my tongue. It was more destructive than I imagined. The terrain in this area had changed and I alone had survived. However, I soon shook my head. It had great destructive power, but it wasn't enough to kill a Grand Duke. At best, it would only destroy the demons and creatures. The Grand Dukes would be able to keep their flesh. Of course, that was assuming that their original state was fine. I climbed up from a crater. My body was at the bottom of the steepest cliff. The melted ground was still hot, but I managed to hold on. My magic bag is messed up. I wanted to get some useful items from my magic bag, but it didn't listen to me. It seemed like the explosion had caused the items in the magic bag to be jammed. I shook my head and kept moving. Cheek. It felt like the ground was melting with every step. The earth was burning and melting like it was lava. Quack. It happened when I almost reached the top of the crater. A sharp sound entered my ears. Degururu. A person's head fell into the crater. I was familiar with it. It was the head of Grand Duke Upa Bulanan. His head had been cut off. As I climbed out of the crater, I looked at the person who killed Upa Bulanan. You son of a bitch. Someone was cursing while vomiting. As I expected, it was Ariel Diablo. Her surroundings were filled with hundreds of corpses of demons and creatures. She had killed all the strong opponents that survived Hope. It was a pure physical achievement, with little help from her magic power. She truly was a weapons master. She could use all types of weapons. Randolph Brigzeal, do you have business with me? Ariel Diablo glared at me. A third of her proud horns were cut off and she had deep cuts on her shoulders. Spears were stabbed in her sides. Anyone could see that she was at her limits. If I attacked Ariel Diablo now with my sword, then it was highly likely I could kill her. She knew it as well. I wasn't in my normal state, but she was in an even more serious condition. You could finish me off now without much difficulty. You can do it, but it should be finished before the other demons under my command arrive here. I shrugged. I won't touch an injured beast. The possibilities were high, but I had lost almost all of my magic power. Besides, in terms of pure swordsmanship, she was ahead of me. There was no guarantee that I wouldn't be gravely injured. Of course, Ariel Diablo would weaken over time. She had far too many injuries for them to heal naturally. It wouldn't be too late to kill her if I just sat and watched. But I needed to be faster than her troops. She was the first person to enter Greenwich Observatory, but her demons and creatures arrived very slowly. It felt like they were coming one at a time. It was a very wise decision. Hoo-hoo, I guess you are more of a coward than I thought. A day will come when we will meet in a normal environment. There is no need to hurry. That is just a coward's excuse. She was provoking me. She was a demon who didn't like being weak. No matter how noble her lineage, she couldn't help her instincts. I smiled and stared into Ariel Diablo's eyes. What is happening in the demon world? I needed to know this. It was the original reason why the Grand Dukes assembled. I had wanted to hear the story, but the invasion of the angels caused a battle. Ariel frowned. Then she smiled like she realized something. Did you not receive the special quest? Let's say it is something similar. Haha, cough, you don't know. No, I will tell you. Right now, there is someone running around the demon world. Someone strong enough to threaten a Grand Duke? Half of my forces were eaten by him. Upa, Pandemonium, Okuyo's forces in the demon world have completely collapsed. What? I didn't answer for a moment. I put my thoughts together. Who would have that type of power in the demon world? I asked incredulously. The demon world was originally divided into 4 equal parts. Ariel, Upa, Pandemonium and Okulos had divided the demon world precisely between the 4 of them. This had continued for hundreds of years. Yet that was blown away in a few years? It was nonsense. It was an impossible task. There wasn't even an army. He is the only one. Is he a god? He is someone who tried to be a god in the past. Ariel was calm. She didn't seem surprised that something like this had happened. While I was frowning, Ariel asked me, Randolph Briggseel, do you know about the Shadow Emperor? Shadow Emperor, Hell Monarch. He had many titles, but I never imagined that name would pop out of Ariel's mouth. Ariel scowled with frustration. I don't know the exact details. That was just what was written in the contents of the quest. But I know a little bit about the Shadow Emperor. If the Shadow Emperor is truly in the demon world, then it will be a hassle. Not only Ariel, but the other Grand Dukes seemed to know about the Shadow Emperor. They felt fear and hurried after hearing his name. If not, they wouldn't have gathered so quickly like this. Indeed, that was the reason. I recalled the high dark elf Sheila for a moment. She was originally Chrysley's mother, but became frozen and was sold at the Demon World auction. She was surrounded by ice, and I felt a powerful curse magic. Oswin hadn't yet found a way to melt the ice. I heard that the magic power was similar to mine. To be precise, it was similar to the Shadow Emperor. I had thought the Shadow Emperor might be in the demon world, but the possibility was extremely low. How could a dead person be in the demon world? Yet now Ariel said that he was in the demon world. The Hell Monarch was devouring the forces of the Grand Dukes. It wasn't easy to believe. The Shadow Emperor, I've never seen him, but I believe Pandemonium has. Anyway, the demons in the demon world wouldn't last that long. Pandemonium said that the strongest mortal is the Shadow Emperor. He said that only all the Grand Dukes attacking him would work. It is a really ridiculous story. We ignored him because he was human. Anyway, he was executed by the gods. However, I remembered. It is the first time Pandemonium has recognized someone. How can I not remember? It doesn't make sense. Even if he was revived, can he alone take over the demon world? The power prepared by the Hell Monarch. I took over the underground world. His treasure trove was still intact. Yet he was trying to take over the demon world alone. It was impossible unless he was a god, and he wasn't one. The special quest stated that he will occupy the demon world in 1 year. We have been participating in the game, so we didn't know about the situation in the demon world. Only you have the key to solving this problem. The key to solve the problem? Returning to the demon world? Something seems suspicious. I should have received the quest to stop the Shadow Emperor. But it is over. I lost my main force. Upa is dead and I don't know about Pandemonium. If Pandemonium's words are true, we won't be able to stop the Shadow Emperor now. I can't stop him alone. It will be better to build up my strength here. I roughly understood. Ariel Diablo seemed to have determined her route. It would have been different if the 4 Grand Dukes had led all the creatures in the demon world. But now that this had happened, she decided that they couldn't win. Hoo-hoo, if you don't kill me now then you will be very annoyed later on. Pandemonium would be more annoying. I moved my eyes around. Pandemonium couldn't be seen anywhere. He didn't seem to have died, so he must have escaped. I missed him. I felt regret. I desperately wanted to stab him after he attacked me, but it seemed like I would need to postpone it. That's right. Ariel Diablo also agreed. She had to admit that Pandemonium could be very annoying. In some respects, Pandemonium was more annoying than Upa. He was sly like a snake. I turned back. Ariel was unlikely to die here due to her demons and Pandemonium had escaped. If Pandemonium knows that Upa is dead then he will move straight away. From now on, it was a fight against time. I had already eaten some of Upa's dungeons, but it would be annoying if Pandemonium started moving. I needed to move faster. Hell Monarch, Shadow Emperor. I thought about the Hell Monarch as I walked. I thought he was dead. His heart was inside me. Even now, my heart was beating faster when I thought about the Hell Monarch. Was it the real Hell Monarch? Or was it someone posing as the Hell Monarch? 1 year. The special quest specified 1 year. If I became a devil and returned to the demon world then I would meet him. Or, he might come here, so I needed to think about my options carefully. Chapter 226 to 228, God. It signaled the beginning of the contest. Upa's death was a great opportunity for the other Grand Dukes. It was a perfect opportunity to reinforce their weakened troops and gain Upa's achievements. I moved faster than anyone else. I swept through Upa's dungeon with Maxium. If I took it over then I would have problems managing it, but I wasn't in the position to worry about that right now. It was better to have a poorly managed dungeon than to have Ariel or Pandemonium occupy it. The 3 remaining Grand Dukes fought over the dungeons belonging to Upa's faction. The humans also started some major movements. They also seemed to know about Upa's absence. They succeeded in preparing the Awakened and conquering one of the dungeons. The dungeon cores. They were a very useful energy source for humans. And the fact that one dungeon disappeared meant that new heroes could possibly appear. Dungeons were overflowing with products that humans could use. But I didn't really care about the activities of the humans. I wanted to prevent the remaining Grand Dukes from absorbing Upa's dungeons. If humans destroyed the dungeons then it would also benefit me. I stirred up the Awakened in Korea. The Giran selected Edward Windsor as the king and he led them to conquer the dungeons. The titles and buffs given to Edward Windsor after he became the king made him humanity's strongest Awakened. Korea was safer than any other country in the world. Monster waves didn't happen often and they could steadily gain resources from the dungeon. Once Edward started his career, many foreign refugees came to Korea. Humans truly gained hope. The most inspiring place was Korea. Korea was recovering and growing remarkably quickly. And I was doing my best to pressure Pandemonium. From Africa to Asia, these places were Pandemonium's main stage. Most of his demons were there and his army was like a solid wall. With strong bonds and superior intelligence, they weaved a spiderweb from Africa to Asia. While Ariel Diablo of North America and Upa Bulanan of South America were fighting, Pandemonium was able to accumulate his power. Once the fight between Upa and Ariel was over, he would rise as a new power. But that was a story of the past. He suffered huge losses at Greenwich Observatory. The loss was half of his original army. Upa was dead and Ariel's damage wasn't that great. In the aftermath of Hope, Pandemonium was the one who suffered the most damage. And Africa was the place where one of Pandemonium's most powerful vassals, Duke Bila, was stationed. He was one of the demons who didn't participate in the meeting at Greenwich Observatory. He had been in charge of support from the rear. Of course, Duke Bila was one of Pandemonium's strongest followers. My dungeon master, Egypt. It was a wide, open land where the wind was blowing. Chrisley knelt down and waited for my next command. I moved my gaze. There were 100,000 creatures lined up in an orderly manner. It was the result of using my points and achievement points. Originally I had 2 to 3 times as many creatures, but the rest were at the dungeons or assigned to Maxim. Occupying Upa's dungeons was also important. Besides Chrysley, there was a 3-meter-tall human with a bald head. An evolved homunculus. Gaparam finally received a clue after studying Gustarte. After examining the flesh of a god, Gaparam's skills in the field of life increased by several times. The result of his work was strong enough to chew on the strongest high-class creature. Although mass production wasn't possible due to materials and time, he added a considerable amount of force to my army. I moved my gaze back to Chrysley. The preparations? It is done. I nodded. If Chrysley said it was done, then it would be. My crimson cloak waved around me. Then I walked through the creatures. Kung, Kung, Kung. Words weren't necessary. Chrysley and the 100,000 creatures quietly followed behind me. The successive victories continued. Pandemonium was on the defensive. Ariel also put pressure on Pandemonium, so it was inevitable. At this point, I controlled half of Pandemonium's dungeons. My army increased by more than 200,000 to reach 280,000, and many of them were advanced creatures. I now had room to breathe. I rearranged the army and dealt with issues that had been postponed. After a long time, I returned to the Korean dungeon and took out 5 pieces from my magic bag. They were the pieces that Chrysley, Tashmal, Hash, Yoon Hai and Edward brought out from the advanced training room. They were divided like a puzzle. I joined the pieces of the puzzle together. The piece of balance, piece of enlightenment, piece of growth, piece of faith and piece of valor have been combined. The interpretation, the 5 pieces mean 5 types of balance. The interpretation, the pieces have combined and transformed into one seed. Seed of creation has been acquired. The seed of creation is a necessary item to qualify as a true God. The species born from this seed will belong to the owner of the seed. The Creator is their God and has the responsibility to lead them. I touched my jaw. The seed of creation. It was an unexpected result. I was convinced. This was an item that the Hell Monarch deliberately hid. After he was resurrected as a god, he had been thinking of creating his own species. Thus, he had a plan to be reborn as a true god. I smiled thinly. It might seem useless, but it was an item necessary to become a god. This was the first time I had seen something like this. Tree of Origin. At that moment, I thought of the Tree of Origin. I had gone there hoping to be qualified. I wanted to test myself against my shadow and make myself perfect. Perfection. What was perfection? It was often said that only a god was perfect. Then did the Tree of Origin want me to become a god? I stood up. I was curious to see how the Tree of Origin would react to the seed of creation. Tree of Origin. A huge tree situated in the center of the dungeon with long roots stretching out. I walked near it. Then the stems wrapped around me like it had been waiting. I accepted the stems without any hostility and was sucked into the Tree of Origin's inner consciousness. A dark space. A small light appeared. The light soon looked like me. It has been a while. I recalled the bitter memories of my confrontations with the Shadow Hunters, but shook them off. The clone in front of me was just an illusion created by the Tree of Origin. It was a virtual image that was different from the main body. It was something I didn't know about before now. That shadow was the Tree of Origin itself. You have realized, is this the world of your consciousness? That's right, this is the closest place to the origin. The man who looked exactly like me spoke without hesitation. I didn't scold the Tree of Origin and asked, "Do you know what this is?" I pulled out the seed of creation. The seed was about the size of a palm and kind of looked like a human fetus. It is one of the items that acts as a god's qualification. Indeed, the Tree of Origin seemed to know what it was. Then I might become a god now. The Tree of Origin shook his head. No, to become a god, your divinity is lacking to become a god. You are at a weak level, and there is a way to fill it up. Fill it up? I was confused. Divinity wasn't something that could be easily gained. But the Tree of Origin spoke like I could fill it up. The Tree of Origin opened his mouth with a smile. Don't you possess an intermediate god? Gustarte? I muttered. I succeeded in capturing Gustarte. Thanks to that, Chrysley's skills advanced and Gaparam completed his homunculus. But that was all. He is a god who has already entered the hands of a mortal once. Divinity is easy to lose but difficult to gain. Once lost, it is rare that the person would wake up. You can wake up the gods will once again with the moon arrow, but what will happen to the god who has lost his direction? His opinion was different from ones who I met in the reverse world. 0001 said that the moon arrow would fix the man. Yet the tree of origin said it was already too late. You seem to know a lot. Nothingness is a place where those who failed to become gods go. And the origin, those who lose their divinity are sent there. Gustart's soul is already halfway to the origin. The tree of origin told me something that I hadn't known. But I still had a question. Who are you? The administrator of the origin. All the trees of origin are controlled by me. I have to lead the former gods here and create new god candidates. And I am now watching the birth of a new god. Tree of origin. No, the administrator of the origin didn't hide anything. He spoke honestly. A god. The tree of origin said that I could become one. My eyes narrowed. So I should absorb Gustarte? The administrator of the source slightly bowed his head. This is all according to the god's will. He was acting like I was already a god. If I earned the divinity and used the seed of creation, I could become a true god. It certainly was an enticing offer. If I became a god, then I could easily become the demon king. It wouldn't be hard to defeat both Ariel and Pandemonium. But that wasn't all I thought about. Don't I have to die to become a god? The administrator of the origin laughed. That's right. Once possessing divinity and having the appropriate qualifications, death is required to become a god. It sounds like you are telling me to die. It is worth becoming a god. It is much more valuable than being a demon king. I understand your thoughts. I was curious to some extent. I closed my eyes and opened them again. My connection to the origin was disconnected and I returned to reality. A real godship was obtained due to the death of the body and the rise of the soul. Gustarte, however, he had a body. It meant that his body itself was made of divinity. Nevertheless, he had fallen and was used by a mortal. Even so, it couldn't be denied that he had a divine flesh. Absorb him. I moved away from the tree of origin. I would become a true god by absorbing Gustarte. But I would have to give up my present life. A god? I had never thought about it. The first god I met was the devil Deathbringer. Deathbringer recognized me as a participant of the game and sent me back to Earth. Thanks to that, I became one of the 72 demons and now reached the position of Grand Duke. And the gods of Earth. While I was on the verge of death, the 72 gods joined forces to turn back the axis of time. I was able to have more experience than others. However, I had never thought about becoming a god myself. I shook my head. I couldn't be swayed by something I hadn't imagined before. From the day I was born, my dream was to become the Demon King. People might say it wasn't comparable to being a god, but I placed different values on each position. For me, I wanted the position of the Demon King. My dream was to sit on his throne and laugh loudly. I came all this way for that one reason. My goal wasn't going to change now. It was irrelevant if I died. Even if I became omnipotent god, I wouldn't be able to sit on the Demon King's throne. The gods had a different concept of time, and they didn't intervene in the affairs of mortals. The administrator of the origin saw me as the next god's candidate. I will awaken Gustarte. I had completely different thoughts from the administrator of the origin. It was because he had a completely different opinion from 0001. So I thought about waking up the involved party. The study of Gustart's body was still ongoing, but it was sluggish. The information was so intensive that it seemed like it wouldn't end in 1 or 2 years of research. But time was limited. After a year, the next enemy to appear would be the Hell Monarch, or a person impersonating him. I needed to prepare for a confrontation with him in the demon world. Until that time, I couldn't leave Gustart's body alone. Yihi. Yes, master. Did you call? Since I entered the dungeon, Yihi had always been waiting nearby. This phenomenon was further strengthened after I collapsed at Greenwich Observatory. It seemed like she didn't want me to leave her sight. I calmly said, "Tell Gaparam, I want to see the results of his research on the moon arrow." Yihi. I watched the research but couldn't understand anything. Then, should I go and kick him? Go ahead. Yihi. Yihi laughed happily as she flapped her wings. Gaparam stood before me nervously, with one hand holding the research materials and the other one holding the moon arrow. The leather on his face looked like a child's face. The study results are good. You did well. The homunculus was very useful. On the actual battlefield, the dominance of the homunculus was great. The homunculus was the one who broke Duke Baya's neck. No, it is thanks to Master's grace that I managed such an achievement. Gaparam bowed deeply. He seemed to have a deep respect for me. Since giving him Gustart's body, Gaparam started to act very politely towards me. I didn't care about his original tone, but it didn't hurt to have Gaparam act like this. Have you made any other progress in the research? I've found out the reason for the homunculus' short life. I had to approach the culture differently from the design itself. When I looked at how a god's body works, it is a technical talk. I wrote it down in a simpler manner in my journal. Gaparam handed over the research data. Most of the results were things that I already knew. He described the tests on the flesh and the effects of a weakened greed, but it was just a hypothesis. Tell me about the moon arrow. He handed over all the data. Then Gaparam sighed and said, "It isn't a common item. The moon arrow is more veiled than his body. But one of the numerous veils, I found out that the moon arrow exists for balance, but that is all." Balance. Maybe it also represented the origin. It seemed like the arrow might restore Gustart's original balance. I spoke in a small tone. I have to try it. What? I will stab the moon arrow into Gustart's body. Gaparam jolted with surprise. It isn't clear what will happen. He might run wild. The 7 sins are objects aimed at the gods. Did you know that? And greed is the best at sealing Gustart's power. That's right. During his research, Gaparam found an association with the 7 sins. The remnants of the flesh managed to suppress Gustart's power, but the 7 sins themselves were aimed at the gods. The more that I thought about it, the sneakier the Hell Monarch appeared. He had prepared a lot for his revenge. I understand. Gaparam quietly retreated after handing me the moon arrow. I turned my head. Gustarte was lying down like he was dead. If it wasn't for the rise and fall of his chest, then I really would have thought he was dead. I held the arrow vertically and I struck Gustart's chest without any hesitation. Puik. The moon arrow shone with a blue light after it entered Gustart's chest. The light grew. The moon arrow changed to look like a big key. A hole was formed in Gustart's chest for the key to enter. Soon, Gustart's body rose up. After the key entered, Gustart's body was split into thousands of pieces before joining back together again. His flesh was being reconstructed. Just like a snake shedding its skin, the unnecessary parts fell to the ground. This process was repeated for dozens of minutes. Once the reconstruction finished, Gustarte opened his eyes. He looked at me with deep eyes that were clearly different from when he lost his ego. Randolph Brigzeal, this is Earth. I must have malfunctioned for a significant amount of time. His words made it seem like he already knew everything. I didn't see any confusion at all. I felt strange as I looked at him. Gustarte, you are a god of the reverse world, right? That's right. I am a god that originally shouldn't be here. And, although I am back, I don't have much time left. Soon Deathbringer will notice and erase me. Are you referring to the devil Deathbringer? Yes. Now that I've regained myself, I am the only god who knows Deathbringer's purpose. His system is even able to neutralize intermediate gods. He will remove me before I can tell the other gods. That was the story behind being controlled by a mortal. Upa wouldn't have been able to just suddenly discover a method one day to control Gustarte. I felt a pure sense of curiosity. I want to know more. Randolph Brigzeal, didn't you participate in the experiment involving Deathbringer's system? Impossible things are created through this system. The dark spirits used a crack to plant a powerful fungus in a gap in my mind. I somewhat understood it. The system, the messages that floated in front of me seemed like they were created by Deathbringer. Certainly, I had been curious. Such a system was created for a reason. Deathbringer had said, "From now on, you are a player in a game I created of this world's destruction." It meant the system was a game created by Deathbringer. I received new information that the dark spirits were the reason why Upa could control Gustarte. Gustarte read my expression and said, "The dark spirits have learned how to deal with cracks. They accessed the nothingness through the crack. The dark spirits invaded my world, which had been connected to the nothingness. Originally, it was impossible, but they borrowed the power of the system and I couldn't do anything. The system is complete. It even has the power to tie up gods. Deathbringer plans to use this system to remove the other gods." In other words, the demons are his test subjects. That is correct. Deathbringer isn't the type of person to be interested in filling the position of the Demon King. Gods shouldn't intervene in such a thing. As the dark spirits master how to use the cracks, they will naturally seek out other gods, or they would try to wake up the beings in the nothingness or origin. The ancient beings that had already been lost, I don't know why, but the dark spirits have become limbs that move according to Deathbringer's intent. The story contained a lot of information. I couldn't follow it easily. One thing was for certain, the dark spirits were doing a job. But it was strange, this hadn't happened in my previous life. The dark spirits had been on the defensive against the other spirits. There were no cracks or fungus that could control cracks. This is all possible due to you, Randolph Brigzeal. It is a side effect of shifting the axis of time backwards. As a result, there is a slight imbalance in the world and lots of cracks formed to fill it up. The many cracks set examples for the dark spirits. Maybe this was what Deathbringer intended. If he planned such a thing by guiding the gods of Earth to you, he is a really scary guy. I am the cause? This happened because I came back? So, you need to repair it. The system created by Deathbringer is so perfect that even I can't touch it. If you take advantage of that face, you might be able to turn his plan upside down. I shook my head. I don't intend to interfere with the gods. Is this interference? Deathbringer is already acting through the dark spirits. He has received enough data from the demons. Who knows what might happen in the future? Deathbringer might get rid of the demons remaining on Earth. He will delete the evidence. It is an undeniable truth. It is already in progress. My eyes narrowed. It was hard to deny Gustart's words. But it seemed like that was only half the story involving Deathbringer. Gustarte, is there any relationship between the dark spirits and the resurrection of the Hell Monarch? The Hell Monarch had died. I had his heart, but it is said that the Hell Monarch is in the demon world. It was weird no matter how I thought about it. That's why I asked Gustarte. Hell Monarch. It isn't impossible for the beings deep in the nothingness to return again to this world. Neither the gods or Deathbringer can interfere. The dark spirits planned and executed the work. But I saw a message that the Hell Monarch was destroyed. Is there a means of destruction without a complete disappearance? The deep depths of the nothingness is a place where even Deathbringer isn't allowed to enter. It isn't unusual for the system to assume that something it couldn't detect was destroyed. One of the things I was most curious about was solved. The Hell Monarch wasn't destroyed, just trapped. Then, the dark spirits reached into the nothingness and pulled him out. The Hell Monarch is a sword to kill the demons. I nodded. In my previous life, that name hadn't appeared that much. It was strange that he would suddenly occupy the demon world in 1 year. Randolph Brigzeal, you have received the protection of the system, so it is impossible for the dark spirits to try something on you through the system. There has to be direct military intervention. Gustarte confirmed it. The dark spirits wouldn't be able to plant something in me. They had the ability to deal with an intermediate god. I thought that was a little burdensome, but it turned out that I was safe in this area. If you make my dream come true, then I will return you, Gustarte. I seriously said, I wouldn't be able to harm him if I didn't use the system, so it wouldn't be bad to have him on my side. Thorough preparations were needed. Absorb me. I don't want to be a god. I flatly refused. A god. It sounded good, but that was just on the surface. I couldn't do everything I wanted as a god. However, Gustarte intended something different. You won't be a god. It is just to stop Deathbringer from getting his hands on me. That is the worst case scenario. The gods originally didn't get involved with humans. That was the history of the old days. A typical example was that they didn't care if a species was destroyed. But those same gods seem to have changed. If I absorbed Gustarte, then I would have tremendous divinity. For all I knew, there was a possibility that my body wouldn't be able to endure it and I would die. I glanced at Gustart's chest. After the key was turned, it had melted and concealed itself in his body. The moon arrow. This is the key to balance. It is a weapon that even Deathbringer doesn't have. As long as this key is kept in your heart, you will be immortal forever. You will gain divinity but not become a god. It will be fine as long as you have a strong attachment to the world. However, your flesh will cease to exist once that attachment disappears. It seemed like a chant. I scratched my chin and asked, won't this be a waste if Deathbringer's plan isn't stopped? You have to plant a seed in the system. If the results aren't registered, the seed of creation can't be registered. It will cause a strong error. Deathbringer invested most of his divinity in the system, so he will fall down. It will take a considerable amount of time to restore his scattered divinity. During that time, you need to destroy him. If you don't, you will continue to suffer for a long time from his ploys. I started into Gustart's eyes. I didn't see any expressions or emotions. There was no suffering or joy. Was this a perfect God? I will be the first demon to kill an immortal. I started laughing. A demon killing a god. It was quite a good accomplishment. I had no doubt that it would be registered as a legend grade or better. Deathbringer was a higher-ranked god than Gustarte. There is no time. He has noticed. Gustarte looked up at the sky. The ceiling was blocking his view, but he seemed to see things that weren't visible to me. At that moment, Kung, Kuung, Quarurung. The sky was shaking. Numerous lightning strikes and strange anomalies occurred. A powerful swirl of magic power could be felt nearby. I stood at the crossroads of choice. However, I stopped worrying. If I stayed still, then Gustarte would be defeated by Deathbringer. I would go through hardships after that. It wouldn't be good business. I accept. I immediately placed my hand on Gustart's chest. The key appeared and I openly took it. Quack. The divinity poured into the key. Gustarte forced the divinity into my body. Soon his body became slightly transparent. Kakak. However, I couldn't look at Gustarte properly. My body that accepted his divinity was collapsing. It was hard to endure the power spilling over. It was the first time I had felt like this. I soon felt a strong sense of helplessness and had a desire to give everything up. I can't give up. I couldn't give up. I would lose my life if I gave up here. But I would regret it. I would have a lot of regrets if I couldn't handle the divinity. I sharpened my willpower so that it was like a knife. And I soon forgot the physical pain. I will go back to the origin. I will cheer for you from there. Please, become stronger. In this world, those who are weak will die. It was a familiar saying. When I was a child on the battlefield, a dying man I didn't know had said it to me. I used it as my creed and became stronger. I painfully opened my eyes. Pook, something was stuck in my chest. The moon arrow, a key of balance. The key was stabbed in me and Gustarte had completely disappeared. He left with a small smile. Hot. It felt like flames were burning inside my body. I wanted to cut my own neck to end this pain. But I still had a few lingering strands of attachment. That's right, I had a lot of regrets. There were many things I still wanted to achieve. I would feel sorry if I gave them up now. Thus I persisted. Despite my teeth and gums bleeding, I didn't let go of my life. Time seemed to go on for an eternity. Later I even forgot about the flow of time. Gradually the pain disappeared and the period of stabilization arrived. But my head was empty. I couldn't remember my name, yet the strong lingering attachment was still in me. It could also be called greed. My flesh melted and disappeared. However, it was reconstructed again. This was continuously repeated. 5 times, 10 times, 20 times. After my flesh was reconstructed for the 33rd time, it was finally able to accept the divinity. My body had clearly gone through a great upheaval. The cells of my body were normalized. Although it was initially some lingering attachments, many things pulled me back to this world. I moved my feet. As my feet moved, I started to remember everything. I was Randolph Brigzeal, one of the 4 Grand Dukes and Demon King candidate. There were several other stories, but this was enough for now. After a long time, the heat subsided and I could open my eyes. I opened my eyes and raised my upper body. I felt a fluffy futon, the magic power that filled the earth and a familiar place. Master, I heard Yi's voice and raised my hand to stop her. I needed to check the condition of my body first. I have changed. What was this? My spirit was still the same. But everything else was new. I was a little bigger and my hair reached to my toes. No matter how many times I cut my hair, it grew again in a flash. There was a strange pattern engraved on the back of both hands. Dragon swallowing a mirror. A giant dragon swallowing a mirror was on both hands. It clearly had a relationship with absorbing the god of the reverse world, Gustarte. In addition, my body had become harder than steel and my internal power felt like overflowing lava. It wasn't comparable to exceeding the limits of my potential or transcending. Was this divinity? It felt like the majesty of a true god. Status window. I was able to quantify the changes in my body. Name: Randolph Briggseel. Occupation: Demon Grand Duke, Dungeon Master. Title: * Dungeon Hunter. Residual stats +1 when occupying dungeons and hunting demons. * Indomitable Warrior, XU. All stats +2. * First to receive a fairy's blessing. U. Magic power +6. * Origin Master, Epic. All stats +3. * Undead, XU. Intelligence and Stamina +5. * Ruler of the Underground World. Legend. All stats +5. The rating of all skills below epic grade +0.5. Stats: Strength 110, +20. Intelligence 120, +15. Agility 110, +20. Stamina 115, +22. Magic power 130, +16. Potential: 585 +93. Remaining stat points: 47. Electric power: 557 gigawatts. Uniqueness: the master of the underground world. The heart of the Hell Monarch has completely awakened. Has a strong divinity for some reason. Skill: Combine Everything, XU. Mind's Eye, Epic. Dark Sword, Epic. Divine Sword Unity, Epic. Passive: Lightning Elemental, Epic. Pride, Epic. Corruption, X Epic. Power of Domination, X Epic. Passive: Spirit Communication, Epic. Passive: Reverse World, God. Skill and item effects: Wrath, Strength +7, Sloth, Agility +7, Pride, Stamina +7. Divine Sword Unity, Strength and Agility +3. Before and after comparison: Strength 119, Intelligence 111, Agility 105, Stamina 112, Magic 116, Potential 470 +93, 570ths. Strength 130, Intelligence 135, Agility 130, Stamina 137, Magic 146, Potential 585 +93. I was able to see more clearly thanks to the status window. I became ridiculously stronger. Furthermore, I hadn't seen the end of my limits yet. Aside from that, no title was given. However, my pure stats had increased remarkably and I received the skill, Reverse World. I looked at the skill Reverse World more closely. After a moment, an explanation emerged. Name: Reverse World, God. Description: contains the strongest powers of the god Gustarte from the Reverse World. The rating of 2 skills can be permanently raised to demigod. An amazing function is available in the Reverse World. Once specified, it can't be switched to another skill. It was the first time I had seen a god rank skill, so of course the effects were amazing. The skill Reverse World itself had no effect, but it could raise the level of other skills to demigod rank. I would be able to achieve enormous efficiency by using it. It isn't strange to call me a living god. I was stronger. No, it wasn't enough to say that I was stronger. I was indeed like a living god. And I suddenly thought about the existence of a god. If it wasn't for the sin greed, I would never have been able to capture Gustarte. He was able to use skills even in his unstable state. But now his strength was mine. The Dark Spirits, Hell Monarch, Death Bringer. It was worth a try. Chapter 229 to 231, Demon King. It wasn't bad since I had powerful enemies. I turned my head and looked around. Most of my main subordinates were here. Oswin, Chrisley, Tashmal, Roy, Rose and Yeehee. Shock, worry, and astonishment could all be seen. But the one emotion they had in common was relief. How long has it been? To be precise, 139 days, Master. Yeehee said. I laughed bitterly. 139 days. That was almost half the time limit given for the Hell Monarch's invasion. It wouldn't be surprising if there were sudden changes during this time. I didn't know what had happened. I expressed my curiosity. I don't see Maxium. Is he still trying to occupy Upa's dungeons? Maxium, a knight who thought of me as the Hell Monarch and swore allegiance. He moved according to my orders. If everyone had gathered, then he should be here as well. But I didn't see him anywhere. The area became filled with static. None of them could open their mouths. Master, Maxium is dead. That bad pandemonium. Yeehee was forced to speak. I frowned. The last I remembered, Pandemonium was on the defensive. He couldn't afford to send out separate troops. I gave Maxim a massive army and he sliced the enemy like a fish in water. In order to get rid of Maxim, the army also needed to be removed. Then how did Pandemonium remove Maxim? It was impossible in terms of common sense. My expression hardened. Tell me about the last 139 days. In the early days, nothing big happened. I was absent, but it was difficult to reverse the situation. Pandemonium weakened and Chrysley continued winning. Maxim also took half of Upa's dungeons. I could see how much was gained by looking at the residual stats. Ariel also did her best to keep Pandemonium in check. She quickly called her forces and also succeeded in restoring the Silver Knights. If this continued, then it was obvious that Pandemonium would be ruined. There were only a few steps left until he had to officially confront Ariel Diablo. So all of Pandemonium's limbs were cut off. He had only one dungeon remaining. All Yi knows is that Pandemonium pretended to retreat. Chrysley will tell you the rest, Master. I turned my eyes towards Chrysley. Chrysley spoke with a grim expression. My dungeon master. Pandemonium planned something separate. He took Hash. I should have been more careful, but I was drunk on the successive victories. Pandemonium did something to Hash? It was strange. Hash had the highest rank among the angels on Earth, but there was no reason to kidnap him. Even if Hash was kidnapped, the angels wouldn't help Pandemonium. In that respect, the angels were like swords that Pandemonium didn't understand. Chrysley continued like she knew my question. Pandemonium. He used Hash as a sacrifice in front of his dungeon. Along with the cherub blood, he also obtained the blood of a throne's angel from somewhere. When we attacked his dungeon, he opened the door in front of us. The throne's angel opinion. I knew the name. Apart from Hash, he was the next highest ranking and led the angels at Greenwich Observatory. He offered the blood of both of them as sacrifices. It was clear that something unusual had happened. What did Pandemonium open? The summons. Celestial door opened. Chrysley closed her eyes like she was recalling that time. She shuddered like she was sick. Tashmal, Oswin and the others also formed fists. At that time, Tashmal interrupted. Her black wings flapped strongly as she spoke. The seraphim Camael descended. Along with his 1.14 million subordinates, I saw that Camael Nim would descend, but I never imagined it would be at the hand of a demon. Tashmal's voice was filled with rage. A summoning by a demon wasn't permitted. She had fallen but was still influenced by her previous angel state. A seraphim was an angel at the very top of the hierarchy. Except for the celestial king, a seraphim was the strongest angel in heaven. I don't think that Camael would help just because Pandemonium summoned him. Self-destruction? He was driven to the edge. He has a nasty temper and can't stand anyone else taking his position. Tashmal's words were correct. Pandemonium was greedy. He wasn't completely different from Upa in this regard. He absolutely hated anyone being above him. His ruin was guaranteed if he opened the celestial door. Pandemonium learnt demonic magic. He even knew ancient magic. He was well aware of what would happen if he opened the celestial door. It was strange that, Camael. What is the damage? Tell me the situation. I turned back to Chrysley. Chrysley spoke in a calm manner. Maxim returned to the earth and the army he commanded was destroyed. After Camael was summoned, 70% of the army I led also returned to the ground. I frowned. I was fortunate that not all of them had disappeared. I hadn't expected it. It was proof of Camael's power. I remained silent and Chrysley continued. Fortunately, Pandemonium was killed by Camael. In addition, Camael is annihilating all living things around him in the name of cleansing the world. I collected all the creatures in Korea to resist, but I don't know when Camael will hit. It meant that I was on the defensive. This had all happened in 139 days. Laughter emerged. And, is there something else to report? I wasn't surprised to hear that there was something else. My gaze pierced through her and Chrysley opened her mouth. My dungeon master, Grand Duke Ariel Diablo is waiting. Ariel Diablo. She was a Grand Duke who built up her strength in North America. In my previous life, she had survived until the end and became the final winner. It was surprising that she came to where I was alone. It seemed like she was near the dungeon and had been waiting for me to appear for 2 weeks. It seemed like she had something to share with me. She didn't even have a creature with her. She risked coming to see me for a reason. It has been a long time, Randolph Briggseel. Ariel was outside the dungeon. She was staying at the human's old outpost while waiting for me. I quietly stared at Ariel. She had become stronger in the past 139 days. It seemed like she had used this momentum to cross the wall. She entered a state of transcendence. Even the broken horns on her forehead were restored. Rather, they had grown larger than before. The horns were a symbol of her strength. I erased any expression from my face and asked, "What did you come here for? You must be bored to be playing around like this." "Hoo-hoo, I'm not a lazy demon." Ariel slowly gazed at me. I took an estimation of her. Her words seemed to be loaded with meaning. It was the skill power of words. Those who were lower than her would be affected when she spoke. Her words just needed intent behind them. But it had no effect on me. "You have crossed the wall. Yet even though you are transcendent, I can't see any end. You are truly a monster." Ariel was shocked. She had become able to measure my capabilities after becoming transcendent. Now that I had absorbed Gustarte, it was impossible for her to figure out anything about me. "Are you busy? I thought it was time for a chat or two between us." "Oh, I'll tell you why I came. You might have guessed. Camiel. It is to discuss measures against the person who came through the celestial door. The situation doesn't look good. I won't hide. What about you? Camiel destroys humans as well as demons. He is truly running wild. This is all due to Pandemonium's summoning. We have to work together if we want to keep Camiel in check." Joining forces? It was an astonishing remark from Ariel. She was the direct descendant of a demon king. She had a demon king's blood. If the Grand Dukes weren't antagonistic to each other in the demon world, then she would have risen to the seat of the demon king. So she didn't know how to compromise. I never thought she would ask for an alliance with me. I had suffered many difficulties in my previous life due to her. As far as I knew, she never extended a hand to anyone first. Yet now she was requesting an alliance with me. She came directly to South Korea. It was amazing. It was a reasonable choice to remove the enemy first. I had been hoping for a confrontation with her under normal circumstances. However, there was no room for that. It wasn't at the end even if Camiel was removed. The dark spirits and Deathbringer still remained. I organized my thoughts. Ariel Diablo, you and I have to clear up this fight. A competition to decide the Demon King? What good would it do to drag it on? I said indifferently, and Ariel soon smiled. She had the same idea as me. The last one to remain would use everything available to defeat Camiel. "Okay, you decide the timing, although I would prefer if it is in the near future." Both of us weren't in the best condition. I needed my physical state to recover a little bit more. The confrontation between Ariel Diablo and I would be watched by all our subordinates. That way, things could be finished without any discord. I turned around. Ariel also disappeared from the outpost. Exactly 7 days later, she led 5 loyal subordinates to South Korea. Ariel was the one who set the timing and location, and she insisted on the confrontation being in South Korea. It seemed like she was sure that I wouldn't use any tricks. It might have been stupid, but she was stubborn. I never thought about using any tricks. I realized how important the meaning of my words was after acquiring divinity. There was a chance that I might lose my divinity. I knew it instinctively. Let's decide this. Randolph Briggseel. Ariel was wearing armor and holding a sword made of a Balrog's bones. The long tail bone made her seem like a Balrog. I wore a crimson cloak and infinity armor. Wrath and the Emperor's sword trembled in my hands. As a result of this fight, the Demon King would be determined. I couldn't relax. I had been dreaming of this moment since I was young. Now it was time to achieve it directly, rather than just dreaming. "I'll do that." I nodded. I only had a short time to breathe. I struck an attack posture. Kawang, an expert in weapons. She could use any weapons. In particular, no one could follow her in regards to swordsmanship. She spent a considerable amount of time trying to learn all the sword techniques in the world. If I got into a pure armed struggle with Ariel, then I might not have the advantage. Even though I had made many advances in High and Moon's swordsmanship, it was still far below Ariel's pure sword ability. I was 2 or 3 times inferior to her in that regards. It was like the difference between an adult and a child. However, I wasn't going to fight using just physical strength. I was using everything I had in this battle. Even if Ariel Diablo had swordsmanship, I was far ahead of her in other areas. Quadaduke. The ground shook. It was like an earthquake was occurring. From the beginning, Ariel had surrounded her sword in chaos. It was her patented, Abyss Sword. In order to counter this, I used Dark Sword. It used to be inferior Abyss Sword, but my magic power was superior and so it showed several times its original strength. I see. Ariel Diablo's brilliant movements caused minor tremors. I felt it. Her next movements were expected. And I had the ability to dominate every situation. If it was before, then I wouldn't have been able to catch all her movements. Ariel Diablo's movements were filled with finesse and every subtle movement was elaborate. I discovered the optimal route to dismantle her attack. Quack, quack, keng. Our swords clashed. Ariel Diablo was pushing ahead with more vigor. She even used dual swords, so I was forced to be amazed at the frequency of her attacks. She was pouring everything into her swords. My movements were haphazard as I defended against her swordsmanship. Although I was just defending. Waruruk. I brought out Pride's flames. They weren't flames that could burn for eternity. Pride's flames became a real hellfire after my rise in magic power. They swallowed everything for dozens of meters around me. The land melted and her movements were sealed. Kuong. But Ariel didn't stay still. If she stopped moving even a little bit, then it would be her defeat. She raised her swords up high and the ground surged like waves. Waterspout. This was also one of Ariel's skills. The land turned into a tsunami that tried to swallow me. Quang, quang, quang. The tsunami was repeated dozens of times. As if that wasn't enough, Ariel raised her sword again and invoked a skill. Swak, swak. The number of ivory swords had increased. They were the same swords, genuine copies. Every single one had remarkable destructive powers. There was a total of 512 swords in the air. Weapon cheat, X epic. It was a skill that could make hundreds of copies of a weapon. The sword was made from the bones of the strong Balrog, and used the high-rated swords to create a huge storm. A total of 512 swords became stuck in the ground, causing it to shake. It was a rain of swords. Giant swamp. That wasn't the end. Ariel clutched her sword and closed her eyes. Then the swords stuck in the earth started to shine. Soon all 512 swords formed a circle around me. Kuong, kuong, kuong. The 512 swords pushed through the ground. Kaiing. Noises were heard from underneath me. A loud noise that paralyzed my hearing. The sound grew bigger until it reached its peak, then it became completely quiet. Kawang. This was the calm before the storm. A deep hole formed and a fierce light emerged from it. The light reached up to the sky and wiped out everything in the middle. A linked skill. Rather than relying on only one, several skills were connected to increase the power. The hole was several kilometers in diameter. The demons and creatures were warned earlier, so they were much further away. If not, they would have been swept away and died. There would have been no exceptions. That's how destructive it was. The gigantic pillar of light continued crying out like a god. Ariel Diablo had transcended. It was an attack that she poured everything into. If she had completed this skill at Greenwich Observatory, then the winning party would have been Ariel Diablo. She would have overturned the battlefield by herself. However, Waruruk, my fire didn't go out. I slowly climbed into the hole of light. Pride's flames were protecting my body. After my growth in magic power, infinite armor had also transformed to look like a red dragon. Dubuk. Finally, my feet touched the bottom of the hole. Ariel Diablo's attack was certainly great. If it hit my body, then I would have been severely wounded. However, this was a fight for our lives. This strike wasn't enough to get rid of me. Gurung. Lightning elemental. Lightning god cried out. Lightning god and Pride's flames both embraced my body to reduce the blow. Once the skill was over, I no longer needed to be protected and Lightning god moved to an attack stance. The size of Lightning god also increased. Skills were affected by magic power, so all the ones I learnt had become stronger. I moved my finger and Lightning god swallowed up Ariel Diablo. Kuong. Lightning god roared. Ariel calmly switched targets. She blocked Lightning god with her chaos sword. Cheek. Ariel's sword split Lightning god exactly in half. The unleashed power fell to the ground, causing power outages. After a while, Lightning god merged and changed shapes. It seemed to be a spear and shield. Lightning God struck, but couldn't pierce through Ariel's sword. However, Lightning God infinitely regenerated and constantly tormented Ariel. I knew it wasn't the end, so I moved. I covered Wrath and the Emperor's sword with Dark Sword, then again with Pride's flames. Also, I recalled Lightning God. Lightning God immediately mixed with Pride's flames. Linkage. However, it carried a very big risk. This was the first time I had tried it. Yet I was confident I wouldn't fail. As magic power increased, so did my level of understanding. In addition, the 135 points in intelligence meant I could safely use the skills. Gurik. Kurururu. There was a slight rebound, but that was it. It caused so much confusion that chaos also formed on my swords. Ariel's eyes changed as she saw it. The time for general attacks was over. Now was the time to meet. Ariel also knew it. We were both confident about the outcome of the fight. If the strike failed, then the only thing left. Quang. The ivory sword was split in half. The chaos on the sword was severed. Ariel stared at me like it was absurd. You monster. Duck. Ariel Diablo raised her hands. I lost. I had the freedom to kill Ariel if I wanted. This was a fight between demons. The loser lost everything and the winner gained it. It would be a natural action for me to take her life after becoming the winner. Soon her vassals arrived. I was accompanied by my creatures. Ariel's demons bit their lips while my subordinates were cheering and laughing. I spoke to Ariel, who was kneeling in the center. Take the lead in killing Camael, Ariel Diablo. You will act as the vanguard to destroy my enemies. I didn't kill Ariel. I didn't have a choice. The winner had been determined, but the war wasn't over yet. First, Camael still remained. Camael was a very tricky angel to kill alone. I need to kill 1.14 million angels first. Until that happens, he is immortal. This was something that Tashmal had told me. The Seraphim Camael, an almighty angel who shared life with 1.14 million other angels. Although it was similar to the skill that Ariel used on the Silver Knights in the past, Camael was different in that all 1.14 million needed to be killed first. In order to do this, I needed to keep Ariel alive. It would be a little easier if she took the lead to destroy the angels. Camael was close to omnipotent, but he wasn't invincible. The most important thing was to kill his army. I needed to shorten that time as much as possible. I extended my foot. Ariel had to kiss my foot for the ceremony between master and slave to end. If she refused, then she wouldn't be able to keep her life. I was doing her a great favor by stamping her with the seal of a slave. It allowed her to keep her honor, but she could never be hostile towards me. From the beginning to the end, I needed to take the result into account. Her choice was also the choice of her demons. I waited patiently. Soon Ariel opened her mouth. I, Ariel Diablo, admit defeat and will swear myself to Randolph Brigzeal from now on. Ariel slowly moved her mouth to my foot. I was surprised. I never thought she would comply without a reaction. It was different from what I knew in my previous life. Did I not understand Ariel's personality because I was too weak? Juck. Ariel kissed my foot. The winner and loser had clearly been decided. My expression didn't change, but I was feeling intense emotions. I had moved without a break and finally achieved my goal. I had succeeded in climbing from the bottom up to the highest place. If someone heard my story, then they wouldn't have believed it. They wouldn't want to believe it. But it was all true. I was now on the verge of grasping the truth. Once the ceremony was finished, messages popped up before me. All the demons on Earth have been subdued. You are qualified to become the Demon King. An incredible achievement. The title, the Demon King, has been acquired. Your occupation has been changed from Grand Duke to Demon King. The Demon King is the ruler of the demon world. It is the absolute name given to those who have conquered the demon world. It is now possible to open the door to the demon world. However, it is impossible to open right now due to Camael's appearance. The celestial door and demon world door can't overlap. The sky was dark. Even the moon was invisible in the darkness. The darkness ate the light as it spread all over the world. And invisible things started to show themselves. The dead, specters. The millions of specters started to move around me. The boundary between the living and the dead was only visible to my eyes. The Demon King could see the other side. That was a story I had heard. I thought it was just a rumor, but it turned out to be true. I lifted my head. I could see the celestial door and the demon world door floating in the sky. Both of them were closed and couldn't be opened. If I killed Camiel, then the celestial door would disappear and I could open a path to the demon world. Resentment. The specters kept whispering to me. Their misery and anger. It was a negative magic power. If my mentality wasn't strong enough, then I would be assimilated on the spot. But I just laughed. I knew the identity of these specters. Those who were killed by former demon kings. It is hard for them to leave. There had been many demon kings. Most of them had destructive desires and couldn't stand others. They sought ruthless destruction and some became crazy. It was impossible to count the lives they killed using one hand. The despair that was enough to fill the world was now entering my ears. The Demon King's karma. I nodded. It had always been like this. In ancient books, the power of the demons couldn't even be compared to the Demon King. Once recognized as the Demon King, they had the power to instantly establish peace in the demon world. I also thought this was ridiculous. But the Grand Dukes seemed to be aware of it. So I was thirsty for the position of the devil. It looks like absorbing the negative energy will affect the quality of the Demon King. The negative magic power was beyond imagination. Even if I absorbed and absorbed, it was an amount that would never end. No matter how much I absorbed, it wouldn't even be 5%. But my mind wasn't controlled by the ghosts. I cleared away the ghosts. I had obtained divinity and gone beyond transcendence. I was able to grasp the identity of the specters in an instant. Get lost, I ordered. Soon the ghosts split apart and a long road was formed. At the end of the road, the place where the powers of the former demon kings were kept. I looked down at my chest. Gustarte had given me the key of balance. Thanks to this key, the divinity wasn't overflowing and was moving smoothly. However, I was always in danger of becoming a god. I was now trying to defile that divinity. I placed my hands on my chest. Tudik, Tududik, and I extracted the key. Kawang. As soon as it opened, my body acted like a black hole and started to attract the specters around me. But what I really wanted wasn't the specters. The specters were specters. I wanted the powers of the former demon kings. I stretched out my hand. I couldn't scoff at the former demon kings. They always had the title of the strongest. Even though I was transcendent and obtained the divinity, they were formidable experts who dominated the demon world with force. But only one person responded to my call. He was huge. Huge wings, goat horns and the skin of a dragon. The Demon King Diablo. He ruled the demon world for the longest time among the demon kings, and his family was always guaranteed the position of Grand Duke. Among the nobles, the origin of his clan could be considered the highest. He existed a very long time ago, perhaps when the demon world and demon king system had just begun. I briefly bowed my head. He was worthy enough to be greeted. I was watching you. I have been waiting for a child like you. A child with the true power of a demon. A child who will bring down the god Deathbringer, the coward who brought down his children due to fear. Diablo took a step forward. Soon he joined me, and the impact was more intense than that of the specters around me. Diablo sent me some short memories. The story of a faraway past. It was around the time when the demon world was being created. The devil Deathbringer created the demons. But the demons' appearance was very different from what I knew. They had goat horns, rough leather and wings. It was different from what I knew, but I still knew it. I had become like that after using corruption. And I knew how strong that power was. Deathbringer was worried about it. The demons were too powerful. The power of the species itself threatened the gods. Even the confident devil felt like his position would be threatened over time, so he took special measures. The degeneration of the species. He removed the horns and wings that were the symbol of their power and inserted human genes. He also added a more violent nature. The demons were weakened and the balance of power between the celestial world and the demon world weakened. If this continued, the demon world would be destroyed by angels. Maybe the demons would self-destruct in a battle among themselves. The devil intended to leave it alone. The demon king Diablo was furious after finding out the truth. The angels were designed to have a similar strength to the demons. This was in order to maintain the balance between worlds. A devil shouldn't want to destroy the children he created simply because he was scared of them. Diablo couldn't stand still while the balance between the two worlds collapsed. So he secretly left a feature in the new demon kings. His power as the demon king would be passed on. in order to achieve a miracle against the angels. He noticed Deathbringer's actions too late. And when an immortal became too deeply involved in the affairs of mortals, their divinity would fall. He was forced to watch as a species was manipulated to degenerate. Due to the presence of the demon kings, the celestial world and demon world barely maintained the balance. But that was it. The demons and demon world were still at a risk of perishing at any time, both internally and externally. So Diablo had been waiting. The origin demon king. He wanted a demon who could go against Deathbringer. And now, the wait was finally over. I plugged the key back into my chest. The swirling magic power gradually calmed down. However, the sacredness of the divinity was greatly lost. The mirrored red dragons had turned black. Even the intermediate god Gustarte wasn't able to block all of Diablo's magic power. No one knew what would happen when two different powers joined. But if the combination was completed, an unprecedented power might be obtained. Quack! I tore apart this negative world. Thus, the ceremony to become the Demon King finished. I see the Demon King. Once the ceremony concluded, Ariel Diablo was the first one to kneel at my feet. She had still spoken informally with me, but it was different after the ceremony. I see the Demon King. Along with Ariel, the demons in her faction kneeled down. Even the quietly watching creatures took the same posture. Even Yi was swept away by the atmosphere. Huang! I flapped my wings. My appearance had changed. I had huge horns and wings. Even if I stayed still, my magic power flowed around and overwhelmed others. This was power. It was a distinctly different feeling from when I obtained the divinity. I had to check my status window. A smile emerged as I saw my changed status window. Name: Randolph Briggseel. Occupation: Demon King. Dungeon Master. Title: Dungeon Hunter. Residual stats +1 when occupying dungeons and hunting demons. Indomitable Warrior. XU. All stats +2. First to receive a fairy's blessing. U. Magic power +6. Origin Master. Epic. All stats +3. Undead. XU. Intelligence and stamina +5. Ruler of the Underground World. Legend. All stats +5. The rating of all skills below epic grade +0.5. Origin Demon King. God. All stats +10. Grants a transcendent rank. Stats: Strength 127, +30. Intelligence 129, +25. Agility 121, +30. Stamina 133, +32. Magic power 138, +26. Potential: 648 +143. Remaining stat points: 47. Electric power: 742 gigawatts. Uniqueness: the Master of the Underground World. The heart of the Hell Monarch has completely awakened. Has a strong divinity for some reason. Inherited the power of Diablo, the origin Demon King. Skill: combine everything, XU. Mind's Eye, Epic. Dark Sword, Epic. Divine Sword Unity, Epic. Passive: Lightning Elemental, Epic. Pride, Epic. Corruption. Legend: Power of Domination, X Epic. Passive: Spirit Communication, Epic. Passive: Reverse World. God. True Words, God. Passive. Skill and item effects: Wrath, Strength +7, Sloth, Agility +7, Pride, Stamina +7, Divine Sword Unity, Strength and Agility +3. Before and after comparison: Strength 130, Intelligence 135, Agility 130, Stamina 136, Magic 146, Potential 585 +93. Strength 157, Intelligence 154, Agility 151, Stamina 165, Magic 164, Potential 648 +143. The origin Demon King. Apart from Reverse World, there was a new skill added. True Words. The words I spoke would contain true power. The rating of corruption also went up. I liked it. I had become even stronger. My monster-like stats were close to 800 points. I had never seen stats so high before. However, this wasn't the end. I would become even stronger. I had no thoughts about stopping here. At that time, Ariel looked up at me. Her eyes were different from before. Longing, respect, She was aware of what I had. Her name was Ariel Diablo. Now I had the blood of Diablo inside me. Blood was a powerful draw. I hadn't thought about it, but it wasn't bad. As a result, she was my faithful servant and would handle the enemy more enthusiastically. I was the Demon King, but I still hadn't accomplished my dream. It was to sit on the throne in the demon world and laugh heartily. My dream was to sit there and laugh out loud. In order to do this, I needed to deal with the enemies standing in my way. Listen, Huang. My voice was loaded with magic power. Furthermore, the skill, True Words, was added. It had a powerful effect that surpassed Ariel's skill. All eyes turned towards me. This is my first order as the Demon King. My faithful servants, kill all enemies blocking my way. Don't leave even one of Camiel's angels alive. As you command, as you command. My rule was absolute. I didn't allow for questions. Everyone naturally agreed, so the only thing left was to ruin Camiel. Chapter 232 to 233, Camiel. Camiel was an angel with 10 wings. He led a huge army of 1.14 million and obliterated all life around him. His power was conditional invincibility. He was immortal unless the 1.14 million angels died. The angels' lives were like nutrients for Camiel. But Camiel now had an intense desire to destroy everything. His original personality as a seraphim was almost neutered. It was because Camiel was an angel who moved according to the Great Will. In the aftermath of the summoning, Camiel was unable to hear the voice of the Great Will. This caused Camiel to want to destroy all living things. They were ordinary humans, but some of them had a strangely different feeling. He thought they were polluted or cursed, so he decided to clean them up. If he erased everything, then the closed door would open again and he could hear the voice of the Great Will. In fact, he was strong enough to do that. A third of Earth had already been destroyed and turned into a land of despair. Destruction seemed inevitable. They thought so until my army struck. The humans were frustrated. After the angels' attack began, nobody could stop them. Originally, the angels didn't actively hunt humans. There was complete disregard towards the humans. To be more accurate, they didn't care at all. The angels only actively hunted demons, with human casualties along the way. However, the attitude of the angels suddenly changed. They left countless dead bodies behind them. The angels started in the west and quickly advanced to the east. Humans started to quickly evacuate towards the east. And one of their destinations was Korea. It was a country that was recovering quickly. There were the strongest awakened, and the average level was also high. There were also refugees because they knew that Korea was safely acquiring resources through the dungeon. But there were also top-ranking people from other countries. They lost their countries and moved to Korea. Thanks to that, there were numerous problems but also a lot of support. The defensive wall was thick and there were many strong awakened protecting it. All the awakened in Korea united to prepare for a war with the angels. Everyone was united until the world darkened and a series of signs appeared. After the signs, many creatures exited the dungeon. We have to attack. The dungeon master has exited, so this is a perfect opportunity. It won't work. Let sleeping dogs lie. We should just watch unless he attacks us. They were divided into two sides and argued fiercely. However, they couldn't come to a conclusion. They constantly scouted the creatures in the dungeon, and there was also a frequent outflow of creatures. The only helpful aspect was that the creatures didn't attack humans. People were curious. Korea's dungeon was quiet. There weren't many monster waves and the master of the dungeon didn't do much damage. The only exception was shortly after the dungeon was created. But right now, Korea's dungeon was in an unexpected boisterous state. The creatures left the dungeon and headed somewhere. Communication around the world was cut off, so they had no idea what the creatures were doing. However, a Chinese reporter entered Korea and revealed what the creatures were doing. The creatures are fighting the angels. It is terrible. The angels have already reached Lanzhou in China. They are being pushed back thanks to the creatures. The last line of defense is the creatures. Lanzhou in China was right near them. It wasn't that far away. If the angels pushed through the line, then they would come here. It was faster than they imagined. But the more surprising thing was the attitude of the creatures. Due to the fact that they stopped the angels in another place, the risk to Korea was greatly reduced. Still, there wasn't much hope. People knew how numerous and powerful the angels were. There used to be many demons who fought against the angels, but now there were few. Most of them were dead. The demons weren't strong enough to overcome the army. They wondered if the creatures from Korea's dungeon could stop the angels. They can't stop it. We have to help them. Whether we like it or not, we have to. Look, South Korea in an iron fortress. We should leave here to help out the creatures who have been killing us for years. That doesn't make sense. But the reporter's attitude didn't change. Not the creatures. I mean the master of Korea's dungeon. Originally, I thought the demon of Korea's dungeon was a dark elf. But that isn't the case. He is the king of the demons. A demon king. A monster who can annihilate tens of thousands of creatures alone. More powerful than any demon I've ever seen. You shouldn't deny him. We should strike him while he is distracted by the angels. The reporter closed his eyes and shook as he recalled it. The demons have a king? If so, isn't he our true enemy? The majority of the awakened opposed this. Their voices became increasingly louder. There weren't many who took the side of the reporter. It is a necessary evil. Demons have sought to annihilate humans, but the king of the demons doesn't intend to do that. If the reporter's words are true, he would have been able to sweep away Korea at any time. We have to choose. Will we choose to live with evil or meet our end here? In fact, everyone had doubts. Master of the Korean dungeon. He was different from other demons. He didn't try to wipe out the humans. He just threatened them once in a while. On the other hand, the angels were different from the stories. They unconditionally hit everyone. Like ants being stepped on, humans were indiscriminately massacred. In the end, the choice was put to one person. Edward Windsor. And Yoo Eun-hai. Edward was the king, but Yoo Eun-hai practically managed Korea. Edward was young while Yoo Eun-hai had many experiences. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Yoo Eun-hai was the one making the decision. Like expected, Yoo Eun-hai opened her mouth. Send out a group to strike at the angels. The damage will be minimized if we stop them out there instead of allowing them to reach here. Should we help the demon? No, I will be honest. I want to live. We have survived to this day, accumulating a lot of strength and hope. However, it still isn't enough. We need time. If we die, then we won't be able to do anything. Our deaths will be the end of humanity. We are humanity's last hope. Wanting to live. The power of those words was great. There were many weak people here. But they had hope for the future. It would be risky to fight here where the weak could be trampled on. So before that, those with power had to stop the enemies. Yoo Eun-hai moved the people's hearts and added one more thing. I will send a message to the countries with governments still remaining to attack the angels. No, I will make sure that they participate. This fight, it is humanity's greatest hurdle. Everything will be decided with this fight. Yoo Eun-hai's expression was stiff. Hope was blooming. Everything would be decided in this fight. I used my points and achievement points. It was so that hunting the angels would be as efficient as possible. There were too many angels for me to handle. I couldn't hunt 1.14 million angels alone. Number of angels remaining. 371,332. This was recognized as a quest, so the remaining number of angels floated nicely in front of me. More than 1 million angels were hunted by creatures in a fortnight. My points started to dry up as they couldn't keep up with the respawning of creatures. Camiel has started to move. More than anything, Camiel was the problem. I aimed at him immediately after the angel hunt started. I was curious to see if his invincibility could keep up against my strikes. And I concluded that it could. There was a transparent membrane that blocked all my attacks. Nothing got through. It was a skill that invalidated all attacks. There were conditions, but the power was real. I had no choice but to go out and hunt the angels. But it was a bit lacking. Time was finite. I had limits alone. So if the humans wanted to destroy my dungeon, then I would have difficulties. So I had to finish it before that. It would have been easy if I had more to spare, but Ariel and her demons were lacking strength. The troops are in a sorry state. Besides, the angels weren't stupid. They realized they couldn't stop me and started avoiding me. They could freely fly around because they had no homes. As a result, my troops received a heavy blow. In particular, Camiel was too strong. There were no demons or creatures who could stop him. Ariel Diablo? Well, I wasn't able to judge her. I'll have to go out directly. Tisk. I clicked my tongue. Time was dragging out. I had to pray that the demons and creatures wiped out all the angels while I was distracting Camael. Once all the angels were gone, the barrier would disappear and I could end Camael. My magic power seemed infinite at first glance, but it wasn't. So it was a fight against time. It can't be helped. I raised wrath and the Emperor's sword. It seemed inevitable now. Camael was huge. He seemed to be 5 meters large. That was tall. Of course, he was much smaller than the seraphim I previously saw. That seraphim resembled a giant planet. In contrast, Camael was life. He looked around nonchalantly while holding a spear. Of course, there was a great deal of destruction in the vicinity around him. Camael turned towards me when I showed up. It was humiliating as I already attacked him once, but I couldn't avoid him now. It would be tough to kill all the angels if Camael killed the creatures. My glance moved to the side where a message was constantly floating. Number of angels remaining: 271,994. Based on the rate of progress, it would take another week. And I was planning to grab onto Camael during that period. Let's see who will last. Seraphim Camael. Camael was silent. He just raised his spear. Quack. The spear was thrown and instantly appeared in front of me. The spear had jumped through space and quickly aimed at my forehead. Quang. However, I had already expected it. I wasn't stupid enough to receive it. I had covered my 2 swords with Dark Sword, Lightning God and Pride's Flames. Kung. I jumped forward before he could react and stabbed out. But the thin shield stayed firm. Tisk. I was superior in all areas except for one. The shield couldn't be penetrated. I didn't like it. There were many angels around Camael. There were at least 30,000 of them. It would be difficult if they struck all at once, but the solution was easy. Don't interrupt. True words. They were overwhelmed by the power of my words. It wasn't just merely my words, but my gestures and expression as well. The angels flapping their wings stopped moving like a wall had formed. 100,000 angels were just standing in place. I glanced at Camael, but the transparent shield meant he wasn't affected. That power is a problem. True words didn't have a shortage of power. But Camael's shield also had its own strength. It was rare for a protective shield to be able to block the area involving the power of words. Once Camael's shield was gone, he would no longer be my opponent. I have to wait for the angels to be removed. At the same time, numerous angels gathered around Camael. I decided to get rid of those angels while dealing with Camael at the same time. Walk. Pride's flames filled the whole sky. It would take too long to kill each one separately with a sword. Suong. Dark sword extended. Once Dark sword grew to 200 meters in length, I wielded it like a whip and every angel it touched was disintegrated. Camael threw thousands of spears to block me, but that wasn't enough to stop my one-sided massacre. The angels didn't attack due to true words, so it was simple to deal with them. Thank you for reducing the numbers, Camael. It was similar to what I had been looking for. 100,000 angels were gathered around Camael. I killed many of 100,000 angels. I couldn't kill Camael, but Camael couldn't block me. After that, Camael didn't gather many angels around here. He watched my movements and only placed the lowest grade angels. He moved alone. It was like Camael realized that the angels were my prey. Our defenses were so strong that we couldn't touch each other. But little by little, cracks were occurring in Camael's shield. I will see how long he can hold out. The number of angels decreased slowly. There weren't many creatures left under my control. Even though I removed the angels here, the rest were vying with the creatures. It was a pure fight. I needed to bind Camael's feet here indefinitely. It was at that time. Papapat. Camael noticed my intentions. I also knew that he didn't have enough power to stop me. Then Camael started to move away from the angels. I was sure it was to hunt the demons and creatures. There was no reason for me to leave him alone. Quang. Lightning God moved ahead. It completely swallowed up Camael's body. It didn't deal any damage, but it affected his movements. I instantly moved in front of Camael. Where are you going? My mouth was in a thin line. My speed was superior. He wouldn't be able to leave this place without my permission. Camael frowned slightly. So you're not a doll. My smile widened. It was the first time I saw any expression on his face since I encountered him. The fight had lasted for 3 days. Yet I didn't know when it would end. It was because the angel killing rate had slowed down a lot. Number of angels remaining: 153,229. The creatures had excellent detection capabilities and found the angels. The problem was that the number decreased by less than 1,000 in an hour. I had to keep fighting as the speed slowed down. It was a tedious war of attrition. I couldn't rest while Camail had time to recharge. The shield was an inherent power, so it didn't contain any holy power. I was aware of this and took a defensive stance. I only went out actively when Camail tried to get away. However, magic power was consumed as these actions were frequently repeated. If this continued, then I would only be able to last one more fortnight. It took more magic power than expected to compete with him. There was a limit to how defensive I could be. I have lost a lot of creatures. I was still receiving reports through Yihi. The total number was still more than the angels. However, the angels led by Camail were much stronger than the creatures at Greenwich Observatory. It was a situation where I couldn't be sure if my creatures could win. The hopeful observation: humans. It was the participation of humans. I honestly believed it. The community of humans in Korea moved. Most of the remaining awakened gathered to oppose the angels. The humans were stronger when united. It was a truth I learnt from previous experience. And they became stronger quickly. Heroes emerged, and it was humans who dealt with the dukes and grand dukes in the end. It was great that they didn't attack my empty dungeon and instead helped with the angels. Chrisley's plan turned out well. This was a plan that Chrisley had thought of. Chrisley moved Yoon Hai, and Yoon Hai agitated the humans. Thanks to that, I had a little help. For example, it was difficult to kill the angels moving on the outskirts. It was satisfactory to let the humans deal with it. In particular, the activities of the Korean awakened were dazzling. Each of the awakened had a high level and had no difficulty in dealing with the angels. It was a little rewarding after I raised them. The more you and I fight, the angrier you seem to be. A devastated land. It stretched out all the way to the horizon. The traces of my fight with Camail were carved all over the land. Camail wielded his spear angrily. I lightly shrugged as I easily got rid of them. I was more bored than him. The 7th day, Camail started to change his behavior. He acted like he wanted to get away from this boring war of attrition. He decided to move while ignoring me. But I wasn't going to let him go. The strikes caused him to flinch and pause. I set up a wall with pride's flames and used power of domination. In addition, my true words weren't broken at all. Stop. It wasn't an offensive ability, so it had some effect. The duration wasn't long, but it was enough to bind his feet. I realized that I could achieve what I wanted without hitting him, so I aimed at that part. Camail's shield was solely for defense. If I didn't intend to use an attack, then he couldn't completely stop it. I just talked and Camail stopped moving. At the same time, Camail's face distorted. It was a really strange move. He couldn't move freely nor defeat me in battle. The angels were slowed down and Camail had no choice but to be influenced. Camail started moving again. Stop. And he stopped. Of course, it didn't always work. Sometimes he managed to defend against true words. It was a fight of probability. Every time it didn't work, I had to go in person to stop him. Approximately 100,000 are left. It was the key to how long this war of attrition would last. Tisk. I clicked my tongue. The number of times true words worked against Camail decreased. On the 15th day, I started feeling a burden on my body. I couldn't catch Camail's movements like before. Sometimes I missed him and a lot of creatures died. I gritted my teeth. I bought more with the points I earned, but the creatures died much faster. There were only 40,000 creatures left. On the other hand, there were 20,000 angels remaining. The number was now only decreasing by 300 to 400 every day. If this continued, I would be defeated. If I lost all my creatures and dungeon, then I would have nothing left to supplement me. Master Gaparam has made a large quantity of homunculi. They are specialized in hunting angels. Although they have a short lifespan, he learned about angels while studying Gustarte. Yihi. A communication suddenly came from Yihi. Ah, Gaparam. He was also there. He had asked me for some time before the battle began. I had agreed, and now the results could be seen. Homunculi that were specialized for hunting angels. After Yihi's words, the speed that the angels were killed had increased significantly. Finally, there were only 400 left at the end of the 20th day. But it was hard for the number to decrease once it reached 400. Hiding. They needed to be eliminated one by one. Camiel felt the danger and scattered the angels across the world. If he could drag out the time, then it would be his victory. 21st day. There were 350 remaining. 22nd day. 270 left. At the end of the 25th day, there were 10 angels alive. But I needed to leave some magic power behind in order to kill Camiel. I would soon reach my limit. I was walking a thin line. And on the 28th day, number of angels remaining. 1. The one remaining angel hadn't been killed yet. While Camiel escaped once more, the demons and creatures hastily searched for the remaining angel. Yuun Hai led 300 awakened to fight the angels. At first, there were 1,000 of them. However, this was the number remaining after 1 month. She was able to have this many people left because of her intelligence. I don't see any angels. Are they all wiped out? An awakened next to Yuun Hai asked. But Yuun Hai firmly shook her head. There are still some left. It is obvious. Tell the other troops. Search around carefully. The different awakened parties had scattered across the world. However, news came that angels hadn't been found for a few days. Everyone thought it was over. They became more relaxed. However, Yuun Hai knew that it wasn't over. Kung, Quarurung. A huge sound came from far away. How terrible. A fight involving the Demon King. It was the sound of fighting between the strongest angel and the Demon King. Even though the distance was very far away, the sound of them fighting could be heard. The world was locked in darkness and light repeatedly leaked out. If humans saw that fight, then they would realize how small they were. Here, the last angel. It was at that time. An awakened shouted loudly. This place was near Pandemonium's dungeon. It was filled with the corpses of many creatures. It was where Camiel was summoned. No one had thought of approaching this area. The stench of rotting corpses was a good enough reason. Yet a small light was coming from Pandemonium's corpse. The light was clearly an angel. You hid well. The last angel. When Camiel killed Pandemonium, it was obvious that he secretly hid an angel in the corpse. It was preparation for this situation. However, the body decayed and the light eventually leaked out. It was correct. A very small angel was hiding inside the corpse. Yuun Hai spoke slowly as she watched it. Get rid of it. Finally, I smiled with satisfaction. The number of remaining angels finally reached 0. At the same time, the protective shield gradually faded away. Soon Camiel was naked. His expression was shocked. His face reddened. Was he not going to accept his defeat? Camiel, now I will finish this. I unleashed all my stored magic power. It was magic power that I placed in reserve after some calculations. Huang, a strong storm blew. Pride's flames set up endless barriers. Only Camiel was left. Chapter 234 to 235, Demon World. Camiel was caught. The powerless angel was no longer my opponent. I wasn't completely fine, but the 1-month battle finally came to an end. However, I didn't get rid of Camiel. I found a way to use him. I can absorb him like Gustarte. I had once absorbed divinity. Thanks to that, I got more than I expected. Of course, it wasn't entirely arbitrary, but I could become a monster if I absorbed Camiel. It was impossible if I was just a transcendent person. Even if I succeeded in absorbing him, the body wouldn't survive and would explode. This was true even if my body had been reconstructed several times. However, I had the key to balance. There were still some vacant spots. I hadn't reached my limits. It was clear that I could become stronger. Greed. I grabbed a stone made of the fake greed. The 7 sins were aimed at the gods and could trap them. Greed was suitable for what I intended. I nodded. Greed needed to eat in order to absorb something. But this was a fake. A skill wasn't generated when I obtained it. The 7 sins were held by the Dark Spirit King. However, that didn't mean there was no way. I used my remaining points to buy all skills related to absorption or digestion from the store of all things in the achievements store. Combine everything. It was a universal skill that could combine everything. After that, I tried to combine skills as well as the stone of the fake greed. Of course, this was risky behavior. Once created, the skill couldn't be deleted even if it wasn't good. If a debuff skill was created, then it would be a dilemma. In my previous life, there was an incident where Duke Depella did something similar. But I was different. Reverse world. I used this skill for the first time. Then the tattoo on my left hand started to shine. Please select a skill to enhance. It was a no-brainer. Mind's Eye. The dragon swallowing a mirror blinked. Mind's Eye, epic, has been upgraded to God's Eyes, demigod. Huang. The light turned off. Before long, my view of the world started to change. God's Eyes. An absolute power overlooking all things. My eyes looked around at the surroundings. Just by watching, I was able to see when the rocks were created and how they had survived the traces of time. My eyes didn't perfectly track the past, but the important events were played. I had a blank expression of surprise on my face. I hadn't expected Mind's Eye to change to this. The rating had increased and many things could now be seen. I raised my head. The celestial door was still in the sky. However, this time I noticed a giant eye in the door that I hadn't seen before. The giant eye was watching the ground. To be exact, it was staring at me. The celestial world's eyes. I immediately flew into the sky. Once I reached the celestial door, I faced the giant eye. Are you searching for the summoned Camael? Or are you spying on me? Will it be detrimental to the heavenly world? At that moment, the huge eyes split apart. Thousands, no tens of thousands of eyes were watching me at once. I just laughed. This is scarier than I thought. I can't move now that I know this. What to do? This was Deathbringer's plot. Maybe the eye had been there since the first angels were summoned. If the eye had been watching the ground since that time, then it wouldn't realize Deathbringer's ruse. But it didn't show any movements. I didn't know if it was because the eye thought that Earth had nothing to do with it or because the celestial world was in the sky. It was clear that the celestial king was a considerable coward. Continue to watch, but you will have to look from the sidelines. If you jump into my fight, then I will immediately destroy your celestial world. I promise. Kuuong. I knocked on the celestial door with magic power. I knew it wouldn't open, but I didn't like that it had been secretly watching the ground. I would rather it stay as a bystander for the rest of its life. Unless it was forcibly summoned like Camael. Otherwise I would thoroughly break it down. This was the Demon King's promise. I owned divinity and had Diablo's power. My words had weight to them. Otherwise, there was a chance that true words could lose power. The eyes slowly disappeared. I hadn't noticed until the rating of Mind's Eye increased. I was in a bad mood, but I wasn't going to declare war. The celestial king, or God, would have carefully listened to my words. I descended to the ground. I entered my dungeon and headed to the core. I looked through the store of all things and achievements store to find the necessary things. I can see it. I wanted a combination of skills. I was going to combine the skills and fake stone using combine everything. My goal was to use reverse world to change the rating and then absorb Camael. I activated combine everything and looked through the skill books. God's Eye showed the intended result of the combination. If I knew the answer, then I didn't need to experiment. I didn't need to experience a failure like Duke Depella. I could get the maximum benefits without any risk. I can't do it just once. I first joined Appetite, Normal, with the Stone of the Fake Greed. And the Absorption, Rare, skill was created. This alone wasn't enough. I once again combined the skill, Digestion, Normal, with the stone, and this resulted in Bioabsorption, Rare, skill. This absorption wasn't the type one wanted. Yet if I combined absorption and bioabsorption, then I got my desired result. Robbery, XR, has been completed. This was it. I nodded. Robbery, taking something by force. At first, I was thinking about enhancing corruption. However, the upgrade to legend rank had reduced the rebound of using that skill. I thought it was better to raise a skill with a low rating. Reverse world. Please select a skill to enhance. I didn't think about it anymore. Robbery. Robbery, XR, has been upgraded to Absolute Robbery, Demigod. You have finished enhancing skills with reverse world. It is impossible to enhance any more skills. Camael had injuries that couldn't be healed and was stuck deep in the ground. He collapsed and didn't move a single inch. He was 5 meters tall but couldn't do anything. I had a determined expression on my face. This would determine if it was worth strengthening the robbery skill. If there weren't any effects, then I had made an irrevocable mistake. I placed a hand on my chest. I turned the key to open my insides and HWAAACK. The sound was accompanied by a big blast of magic power. Absolute robbery. I selected the target. It was his power. Zhejiang. The first thing I heard was a cracking sound. Then white light started leaking from Camael. The light entered the storage place for magic power. The power of the Seraphim Angel Camael has been stolen. The Angel Camael was equipped with a mighty divinity. The robbery was successful, but if there isn't anything to neutralize the divinity, then there will be significant side effects. The robbery. I kept it in mind. Anyway, I was a hunter. A hunter was predatory. In that sense, there was no other word that represented me so well. After sucking in all of Camael's power, I locked the key again. The power swirled and integrated with my current power. I feel full. I expressed my satisfaction. I was certain that I was stronger. I had a determined expression on my face. A calm smile could be seen. Status window. There was no reason not to confirm it. Name: Randolph Briggseel. Occupation: Demon King. Dungeon Master. Title: Dungeon Hunter. Residual stats +1 when occupying dungeons and hunting demons. Indomitable Warrior. XU. All stats +2. First to receive a fairy's blessing. U. Magic power +6. Origin Master. Epic. All stats +3. Undead. XU. Intelligence and stamina +5. Ruler of the Underground World. Legend. All stats +5. The rating of all skills below epic grade +0.5. Origin Demon King. God. All stats +10. Grants a transcendent rank. Stats: Strength 130, +30. Intelligence 149, +25. Agility 125, +30. Stamina 145, +32. Magic power 142, +26. Potential: 691 +143. Remaining stat points: 47. Electric power: 742 gigawatts. Uniqueness: the Master of the Underground World. The heart of the Hell Monarch has completely awakened. Has a strong divinity for some reason. Inherited the power of Diablo, the Origin Demon King. Skill: combine everything, XU, God's Eye, Demigod, Dark Sword, Epic, Divine Sword Unity. Epic, passive, Lightning Elemental, Epic. Pride, Epic. Corruption. Legend, Power of Domination. Epic, passive, Spirit Communication. Epic, passive. Reverse World. God. True Words. God. Passive, Absolute Robbery, Demigod. Skill and item effects: Wrath, Strength +7, Sloth, Agility +7, Pride, Stamina +7. Divine Sword Unity, Strength and Agility +3. Before and after comparison: Strength 157, Intelligence 154, Agility 151, Stamina 165, Magic 164, Potential 648 +143. Strength 160, Intelligence 174, Agility 155, Stamina 177, Magic 168, Potential 691 +143. Excellent. I passed 800 stat points. And Camael was a defensive angel, so my related abilities were greatly increased. Intelligence and stamina. It wasn't wrong to say that this was enough to resist almost all magic attacks. Camael's body was only a shell and he soon turned to dust. Kuuong. Suddenly, there was a sound from the sky. The celestial door was fading away. The giant eye was already gone. I spread my wings and floated in the air. And I shouted, "Victory!" The shout echoed and spread all over the world. Now, after finishing, it was time to go to the demon world. The Hell Monarch. The dark spirits woke up the Hell Monarch sleeping in the deepest part of nothingness in order to kill the demons. Now he was devouring the forces in the demon world. If he did this alone, then he would have great power. But I didn't know the limits of my strength. In this state, I wouldn't be afraid of a god. I met Gustarte, experienced his strength and absorbed him. I was sure of it. The Hell Monarch was just an unfortunate emperor frustrated by the gods and who died trying to become a god. In fact, I felt some degree of anticipation towards his skills. I reached this place with the help of the heart of the Hell Monarch, so I couldn't imagine how strong its owner would be. I won't lose. I was sure of it. Frankly, Camael wasn't my opponent when it came to pure power. Now I was even stronger than when I dealt with Camael. I formed a fist. The door to the demon world gradually neared the ground. I took a short break. Cleaning everything up and reorganizing the creatures was exhausting. It wasn't a good idea to open the door to the demon world right away. Plus, it is finished. Oswin spoke to me in a pleased voice. Oswin held a necklace in his hands. A mysterious magic power could be felt from it. I couldn't avert my eyes from it. I stared at it with God's eyes. Soon, detailed information about the necklace surfaced. Name: Pharma's necklace, 10 out of 10. Description: a necklace that protects users from certain curses. It will be destroyed after blocking 10 curses. List of curses that it defends against: pain, ice crystal, doll's expression, golem's soul, soul destroyer, destructive humanity, flames of the soul, curse of thorns, knight's curse, divine suffering. The list included countless curses. There were many that I didn't know. This is to protect me against the Hell Monarch? That's right, I designed it to stop all the curses that the Hell Monarch might use. He was full of pride. I shook my head and asked, the Hell Monarch knows how to use these curses? Yes, he immersed himself in it and studied curses very hard in his later years. His learning speed was at the level of the gods. He isn't a shaman. It was amazing. There were at least 100 curses on the list. It was almost impossible for one person to know how to use so many curses proficiently. The Hell Monarch wasn't someone famous for using curses. He was a genius of swordsmanship and a master of demonic magic. In short, he was a magic swordsman. I was sure that he would be difficult to deal with even with the curses not affecting me. Your Majesty's body can't be affected by curses. Most of the curses on the list won't work. But you should wear it just in case. I had 174 points in intelligence. Curses couldn't harm me. I had commanded Oswin to make it before I knew that. But Oswin didn't seem to care. He has a great grudge against the Hell Monarch. Oswin was originally a human. He was a good blacksmith who liked fire. Then one day, the Hell Monarch came and forced him to make the 7 sins. But that wasn't the end. He was dragged to the underground world and lost his original appearance. It was natural for him to hold a grudge. The evidence was that Oswin's eyes were burning with anger. Thank you. The advice of one's subordinates. It wasn't bad. It will clearly be helpful. I hope so. I turned away after putting on the necklace. I stood at the top of my dungeon and stared down at the ground. I had almost fulfilled the promise with the gods. They returned me to Earth in exchange for Earth and the lives of the humans. Although many humans died, they still survived and continued to grow together. This was the strength of humans. It was similar to a cockroach, but I liked that persistence. It was similar to me. I wouldn't have reached this position if I wasn't greedy and hadn't stopped until the end. In any case, humans were strong. They would become stronger and stronger until the glory of the past was restored. If I left this place, then Earth would be safe. Even if there was a problem, it wouldn't collapse easily due to the presence of the awakened. It had already been 50 days since I absorbed Camael. There was nothing more I had to do on Earth. Everything was finished, so it was pointless to waste any more time. I still hadn't received the message that the demon world had been occupied. I couldn't give him time to completely conquer the demon world. It was almost time, so he wouldn't have expected someone else to come from behind him. I returned to the dungeon. There were numerous creatures gathered near the core. Chrysley and Ariel were at the forefront. I opened my mouth without hesitation. We will travel to the demon world. The demon world. They were nostalgic words. I raised my hands. An invisible line connected to the demon world door was always following me. I tugged on the line. Soon, the gigantic door in the sky opened and a huge crack appeared in front of me. The crack turned into a magic circle. I moved my feet first. Everyone started moving behind me. A strong smell pierced my nose. There were corpses scattered all over the place. A purple sky and crows crying. 3 moons floated in the sky. The demon world. I immediately knew that I had arrived in the demon world. There was no way I couldn't know. This was the place where I was born and grew up. Everything was different from Earth. I need to head to the center. The surrounding terrain was familiar. The Demon King's castle wasn't far from there. The 4 Grand Dukes occupied the north, south, east and west around the Demon King's castle. But there was also a deep smell of death. The demon world was always at war and there was no day where blood didn't flow. The number of demons who died in battle couldn't be counted. Nevertheless, the smell of death had never been this severe. The loser usually died and the winner survived. This degree wasn't normal. In particular, it became stronger in the vicinity of the Demon King's castle. The center was the place where the Grand Dukes were kept in check. My senses spread far and wide. If I paid attention, then I would be able to notice any presences within hundreds of kilometers. However, my senses didn't notice anything. There was another strange thing. The smell of death was unbearable. There are no corpses. That's right, there weren't even any dead bodies. Both the living and the dead couldn't be seen. I didn't know what this meant. Ariel Diablo, whose forces are still remaining in the demon world now? The Hell Monarch hadn't conquered the demon world yet. A message would have popped up if that had happened. In particular, Ariel would have noticed first. Ariel and I respected each other. The power of Diablo dwelled inside me. I would leave her castle intact. Ariel knew how merciful I was being. Ariel bowed her head thankfully and said, "My forces are left. The rest of them have collapsed. Upa, Pandemonium and Oculos." The forces of 3 Grand Dukes had already collapsed. It was alarming. "Let's go to your castle. The Hell Monarch might be nearby." The Hell Monarch would be forced to appear where there were still some opposing forces. His goal was to conquer the demon world. There was no need for a guide. I knew exactly where Ariel's castle was. It was because I had visited that place to challenge her in my previous life. I would love to sit down right away. I moved my gaze in the direction of the Demon King's castle. Only those recognized as the Demon King could enter that place. The throne of the Demon King was left there. I wanted to sit on the throne, but there was still work to be done. I wouldn't truly become the Demon King until I took care of the Hell Monarch. The demon world was the place where the demon ruled, but now the Hell Monarch was trying to conquer it. It wasn't right. I will delay it until later. I couldn't let greed move my feet. It wouldn't be too late after killing the Hell Monarch. Ariel's castle was located on the north side of the Demon King's castle. It was a place covered with snow. The reason why she stayed at the dungeon in Greenland was due to the familiar environment. It was a gigantic castle where snow fell all year long. Castle, it was the size of a city. It might be a little exaggerated, but it wasn't strange to call it the size of a small country. This was the place where Ariel's forces remained. It was the place where Ariel ruled directly. However, even this great castle was quiet. Creatures could be sensed inside, but they were too nervous to even breathe. Most of the demons were hiding and couldn't be seen unless I looked closely. They all had a typical combat posture. Demons were also protecting the gates. They seemed to have detected my troops from a distance. I led an army of 150,000 creatures. I was able to bring this many due to the points I got from Camael. They were a little weaker than before, but they mainly consisted of intermediate and advanced creatures. The demons in the castle detected my army from a distance and judged that we were enemies. Ariel asked for my permission and headed to the gate. "Open the door. I am Ariel Diablo." Her voice echoed around the gate. Mild magic power infused her voice so there was no way they couldn't hear it. The ears of the demons were 10 times better than humans. Someone appeared at the highest point of the gate. It was an old demon with a short beard and wearing armor. "Is it really Ariel? Can't you see the horns? If you don't open the door right now, then you won't be able to avoid censure." Ariel raised her chin as she replied. She was the original owner of this place. Ariel's subordinates followed her loyally, so they should open the door right away. But it turned out differently than I thought. "I'm sorry, I can't open the door." "What?" As the old demon shook his head, Ariel's expression turned chilly. She wasn't allowed to enter her own castle. What did this mean? Despite being defeated in the game to become a demon king, Ariel was still a Grand Duke. This might be a ploy of the Hell Monarch. My choice might destroy this castle, so I have to be careful. The old demon persevered. "Sassin, don't you even know your master? I will break down this gate and kill you all." Ariel's long horns trembled. She took out an ivory sword and covered it with chaos. Ariel's patented skill. It was a skill that only she could use. That should have been enough proof, but the old demon was stubborn. "Then take off all your clothes and turn around. I will see if there is the Hell Monarch's scar. If I use magical measures and my opinion is wrong, then I am willing to offer my neck." "This cowardly bastard," Ariel growled. Her followers always acted like knights towards her. But this was the last straw. Besides, I was here. I didn't give her permission to move. This was also her castle. She didn't want to damage it. Ariel's eyes turned towards me. I shook my head and said, "Do it." Ariel had great ambitions, so she promptly responded. She respected me and obeyed without protest. Chapter 236 to 237, Hell Monarch. After our innocence was proven, we could safely step into the castle. The old demon Sasson offered his head, but I didn't take it. He was the one who ruled this castle instead of the Hell Monarch. There was a lot of information I didn't know, so it wouldn't be good if the commander changed suddenly. When the Hell Monarch first appeared in this place, he was alone. A spacious room. It was a large room that reminded me of a plaza. There were a lot of luxurious tables, chandeliers, etc., as well as high-quality food. Sasson quietly kneeled down and proceeded to tell the story. He was on the ground due to his sin. However, his army increased in size as time passed. All the demons he killed became his puppets. Although the White Knights found him, the power of the Hell Monarch exceeded our imagination and we lost an important power. I wasn't even aware of this fact until the White Knights became an enemy. Sasson hit his head against the ground. He felt regret about not knowing sooner, but it wouldn't have changed the situation. Ariel sat in her seat and didn't move. Only the main demons could enter this banquet hall. I sat in the most prominent position with Ariel beside me. As the deep silence continued, Sasson kept talking. The ones who became puppets of the Hell Monarch only follow his words. The amazing thing is that the puppets still maintain their own personalities. He is able to use magic freely while wielding a sword. In some cases, they pretended to be allies and completely decimated the bases. We have to distrust everything. They had no choice. It was a situation where they didn't know who was the enemy. Their smiling allies could stab them from behind. They couldn't trust anyone. In such a situation, a proper war couldn't happen. It wasn't a coincidence that all of the Grand Duke's troops were wiped out except for this place. His army is growing so big that no one can resist. How many? 3 million, that is the lowest estimate. Huh? Ariel breathed out heavily. 3 million? That was the number if all of the Grand Duke's troops were combined. It meant that those killed by the Hell Monarch's puppets were also changed. I didn't think that the Hell Monarch could wipe out a large army of 3 million enemies alone. It was the same if he killed or his army did. Who would be able to deal with it? The soldiers lost their will to fight. An invitation to a place of death. I remembered Greenwich Observatory. At that time, all the Grand Dukes except for me received a special quest to go to the demon world. It was clear what would have happened if they reached the demon world. They wouldn't have been able to win. My army this time was no exception. Still, Ariel has returned, so the morale of the soldiers is soaring to the sky. The knights are also motivated. I am not the master of the castle now, Ariel said strictly. Perhaps Sasson might have already noticed. I was just listening with my arms folded. Yet he always paid attention to me. Sasson, raise your head, Ariel ordered once again. Then Sasson slowly lifted his head. Ariel glared at him coldly and declared, "Randolph Brigzeal, he carries the name of the Demon King. Remember this, Demon King, I am glad to meet you." Sasson knelt in front of me. This was my position. It was a position that wouldn't change for a very long time. I would be Ariel's eternal master. Her subordinates' loyalty was unchanged, but the ruler of this place had shifted. There were also the creatures following me. Sasson was forced to face the reality that Ariel was defeated in the war to become the Demon King. The number of troops inside the castle was 300,000. Including my creatures, there were 450,000. A sufficient number. Quite a large number of troops were stockpiled. It was proof of Sasson's exceptional abilities. But it was also true that it was troublesome. The demons and creatures were likely to become obstacles. Your Majesty, just leave it to me. Oswin came out once again. Oswin pulled out a small mirror. One of the Hell Monarch's curses is to keep the dead moving. This mirror of truth can stop the curse from spreading to our troops like a contagion. Isn't this too small? I asked. A small hand mirror didn't seem capable of stopping a curse. Oswin nodded like he agreed. I can make it bigger. I just need enough time and materials. Ariel interrupted. All the magic materials required are available. But time is the problem. The army of the Hell Monarch is nearing. A week. Please endure for that time. Of course, it won't end even after I finish the mirror. The mirror must be protected. If it breaks, then the curse will be triggered and spread again. Can't you solve the curse? It is possible, but it is a matter of efficiency. It can't be done in a week. Even if I had 10 other people at my level, it would take me 3 months. You have to create the mirror. Ariel also realized the reality. By this time, she had realized that Oswin was the great blacksmith. Oswin, the Twilight blacksmith. Even the gods were jealous of his techniques, so there was no one at a similar level to Oswin. Go ahead, I will buy you 1 week. If my thoughts were correct, it would be possible. I will follow. Me too. Ariel and Chrisley both came forward. I shook my head. I will go alone. Don't you two have something to do? They were embarrassed as they realized. Ariel needed to stabilize the soldiers inside the castle while Chrisley's brain would be used to develop a plan. Magical measures also needed to be taken. These things couldn't be compromised. It was only possible for them. Alone, will it be okay? I have an idea. It will be enough to buy time for a week. I was confident. Even if I made a mistake, it wouldn't be that easy to kill me. Many high-ranking demons and creatures were guarding the Hell Monarch, but it was possible if I was only buying time. Most of the high-ranking demons have transcended. I could almost say that they were above a duke. All 72 demons, including the Grand Dukes, had their abilities restricted after being sent to Earth. But now, Ariel had almost recovered the power of her prime days. Hell Monarch, I will make you prove yourself. I smiled thinly. I had most of the things that should have belonged to him. It couldn't be helped if he felt pained when looking at me. He could only blame himself for coming back from the nothingness. As soon as I left the castle, I raised the Emperor's sword. A treasure preserved by Maxium, it was originally used by the Hell Monarch. It would never break and had one more function. The Emperor's army. Qua. A golden light sprang from the Emperor's sword. A large crack formed near the Emperor's sword, and creatures started to gradually emerge from it. Chiok, Chiok. They came from the treasure trove. Their names were the Phantom Cavalry. 100,000 cavalry members lined up behind me. They had no body, but wore iron armor. All of them were advanced grade or higher. 90 days. This was the real Emperor's army. The 100,000 strong army would remain for 90 days and would destroy the enemy according to my commands. They had been made by the Hell Monarch for this function. They had no flesh, just artificial armor. In addition, curses wouldn't work due to my skill, power of domination. Hell Monarch, I wonder what it feels like to be attacked by a soldier you made yourself. I spread my wings and flew forward quickly. Dagudik, Dagudik, and the 100,000 Phantom Cavalry moved in an orderly manner behind me. The army of the Hell Monarch wasn't far away. At most, they were 3 days away. If I was even a little later, the castle would have fallen. A lot. Camiel had led 1.14 million angels. 1.14 million. It took a month to wipe them all out. If I had delayed even a little longer, then I would have used the Emperor's army. I did well to save it for now. It would have been a waste if I used the Emperor's army on Camiel. I would have had no way to stop the army that was 3 days away. I could use myself as bait, but I couldn't be sure without knowing the Hell Monarch's power. His curses were able to affect transcendent demons. It was good that I didn't move when I realized how annoying Camiel was. It is hard to figure out because there are too many of them. Sasson had estimated 3 million enemies. However, the number seemed to go far beyond that. In addition, there were the creatures of the demons. Among them was a mixture of dragons and earth dragons. Balrog. I saw a Balrog that was known to be extinct long ago. Endless creatures. The highest grade creature was the Balrog. They were a high-class LV5 creature and no higher levels existed. The true demonic dragon Aogen wasn't treated as a creature, so he couldn't be ranked at LV6. In other words, the Balrog was the strongest creature in the demon world. It was about the size of a hydra. Despite being smaller, it was still over 10 meters. But it also had large wings. Just flapping the wings caused magic power in the area to fluctuate. When looking at ancient stories, even the demon kings had struggled to remove a Balrog. A Balrog never got tired and many demons were sacrificed. Even the ninth demon king, Alexis Troha, was killed by a Balrog. Like Aogen, the Balrog surpassed general creatures by an unimaginable amount. The appearance of the Balrog who killed the Demon King was described in detail. The name, Rogugen. I frowned. Rogugen's description in the literature was very similar to the Balrog that I could see now. Except for the right wing, everything else was the same. It came from the nothingness. It seemed like the Hell Monarch wasn't the only one who came back from the nothingness. The Phantom Cavalry didn't engage in a full-scale war with the enemy. It was an insurmountable wall of creatures, so it was foolish to run at them from the front. They quickly hid and retreated, steadily buying some time. Common demons and creatures couldn't survive the swords wielded by the Phantom Cavalry. If there was a strong enemy, then I came out and minimized the damage. The enemy is moving faster. Why? It was simple. The Hell Monarch had realized the existence of the Phantom Cavalry. The soldiers he had created were now appearing as enemies, so he was angry. He won't come directly. It was a little disappointing. If the Hell Monarch came out for the Phantom Cavalry, then I would have a chance to strike. It would be difficult if he kept moving behind the 3 million troops. It was best to just buy time. I was only able to win against Contigonam by using corruption. I'm not the same as I was at that time, but Rogugen is something that came from the deepest parts of the nothingness. There are many differences. It was on a completely different level. Thanks to God's eyes, I could see that Rogugen was much stronger than Contigonam. A total of 721 stat points. Indeed, a Demon King Slayer. Something far beyond normal creatures. An exceptional Balrog who had managed to kill a Demon King. At that time, it was able to absorb some strength from the Demon King it killed. I wasn't disturbed by the simple numerical comparison. There was a difference of over 100 points. If I went against him, then I would be able to win with no difficulty. But then I would have to give up on buying time. The Phantom Cavalry would be surrounded by enemies and 100,000 troops would disappear. I wouldn't be able to block such a large army for 4 days alone. The Hell Monarch isn't my only enemy. The Dark Spirits might try some tricks. I was also worried about Deathbringer. It would be wise to reserve some troops to prepare for another confrontation. Fortunately, Rogugen didn't seem to possess any authority. He was strong in terms of brute force. I need a way to get rid of Rogugen independently. I looked at Rogugen as I directed the Phantom Cavalry. Rogugen floated in the air and calmly watched the Phantom Cavalry. The Balrog are a warlike species. I heard that it was a characteristic of Balrogs to be excited when a battle took place. Was it because it thought there were no enemies? It might not be stimulated by the Phantom Cavalry. The huge creature set me on edge. Something that big and powerful could smash the castle at once. I have no choice but to stimulate it. I nodded. I had no choice but to move. In order to reserve some troops, I needed to fight. It was time for me to come out. I will be back in 30 minutes. Try not to be surrounded as much as possible. I gave a command to the Phantom Cavalry. 30 minutes. I was sure that I could remove Rogugen in that time. It wasn't difficult to deal with an enemy who came out alone. It was because true words would work to a certain extent on transcendent beings. As long as the Hell Monarch didn't come out with the demons and creatures, I would be able to handle Rogugen. If the Ghost Cavalry stayed safe, then I would be able to continue buying time. I flapped my wings and gazed at the Balrog. Wrath and the Emperor's sword were covered in a dark aura. Then I applied Lightning God and Pride's flames. After my superior magic power was added, it was an extraordinary skill comparable to Ariel's proprietary Abyss sword. As the result of repeated linkage, the skill, Chaotic Blade, Legend, has been learnt. If something was repeated many times, then a skill could be obtained. The odds were slim, so it was unlikely to appear even after thousands of repetitions. Even if it came out, it was hard to expect a high rating. Yet a legend rating had emerged. It was thanks to my high intelligence. Intelligence played many different roles. It increased magic resistance, familiarity with skills, eliminated the drawbacks when using a skill, and improved mental power. As such, it was possible to rapidly create a skill. It was the first time for me, but it wasn't a bad result. Then the Balrog headed towards me. Huang! It flapped its large wings and instantly appeared before me. I was strong. It noticed the great magic power contained in my swords. The difference in our sizes was evident. But fighting had nothing to do with size. I'll give you a chance. Go back to your original place. A demon king slayer. A historically famous creature. It should be fine for me to face him. The Balrog flapped its wings strongly. Quarurung. Lightning struck me. However, I had a high level of magic resistance. And the Balrog was a magic-using species. The worst mistake. This was why I bet on a quick victory. I received your greeting. Rogujin. Chaotic blade grew longer. The Balrog was a magical species, so it naturally had high resistance. Its physical defense also exceeded imagination. But it was doubtful if its body could withstand my attacks. Now it is your turn to receive my greetings. Quack. My swords penetrated through the lightning. I split Rogujin's body exactly in half. Dozens of demons who were dukes rushed towards me. Stop. I consciously used true words. This skill gave my words power. Even the transcendent couldn't be completely free of this influence. There was only a difference in the duration time. True words was advantageous when dealing with a lot of opponents. And the dukes stopped moving according to my words. However, the duration was extremely short. It only lasted a fraction of the time. Overlapping power. I had experienced this before. It was when I faced Camael. It overlapped with Camael's power and didn't have a great effect. This time was the same as well. The demons and creatures were dominated by the Hell Monarch, so they were protected by his power. In particular, the dukes received more protection. I activated God's Eyes. There is a defense with a higher security rating than God's Eyes, Demigod. But thanks to high magic power, 168, 77% of the interpretation has been completed. Guardian's power, God. Destructive humanity, God. Absolute domination, God. Death, God. Song of the Dead. Legend. Curse of Shadows. Legend. Curse of the Mountains, legend. There were 4 huge curses on them. That was why the power of my words hardly had any effect. Besides, I needed to look at the curses hanging on them. It seemed like the Hell Monarch already had the power of a god. How much? I need to be vigilant of a god. The Hell Monarch was a human. He had guardians around him. As far as he was concerned, foreign invasion was impossible. He wanted to become a god. But the gods didn't allow him to become one. The gods joined forces and pushed him into the nothingness. He didn't think they would stand still and plan something, but failed. Then the dark spirits pulled him out again. He would have become even stronger. I was sure of it. He was stronger than he was during his days as the Shadow Emperor. The dark spirits would have helped. No, I still didn't understand his power. No matter how godlike a human was, he needed to have his own power. He was passionate about learning curse magic, but endless hours were needed to make it reach this point. He might just be close to a god in relation to curses. Rather, he didn't learn curses that were below a legend rating. The guardian's power was definitely strange, so he must have guardians. Maybe there were even more. God's Eyes had only interpreted 77% of the information. Is he really the Hell Monarch? I wondered. I wanted to determine the truth. Get lost. Pride's flames explosively wrapped around them. As the demons hesitated, I instantly rushed through the air. The army of the Hell Monarch was great. Millions of creatures were lined up for dozens of kilometers. And at the very back, I found a person slowly climbing up the back of a dragon like he was taking a leisurely stroll. I knew who he was as soon as I found him. The figure on the back of the dragon was the Hell Monarch. My heart was jumping wildly. However, my eyes weren't looking at the Hell Monarch. I was looking at the aura around him. It was a scary feeling. It felt like my whole body was stripped bare. I couldn't move. It was like my entire body was in the clutches of a leviathan. I had experienced it once before. Before I went to Earth, the man who made me an offer was emitting that type of magic power. I only felt it very weakly at the time, but now I knew for certain. Deathbringer. Deathbringer was inside the Hell Monarch. That's right, he was the Hell Monarch but wasn't. Deathbringer was wearing the mask of the Hell Monarch. Deathbringer's eyes turned towards me. A thin smile. He was laughing at my arrival. No wonder why it was strange. The Hell Monarch had 4 powers at a god rating. It was possible if he was Deathbringer. The Devil, a god with the highest level of divinity. Among the gods, he was a powerful existence. Even if there were dozens of Gustarts, they wouldn't be able to beat Deathbringer. It must be possession. It was impossible for an immortal to enter the demon world to conquer it. It was the same even when it came to possession. His divinity was lowered. If someone let their guard down, then they could be deprived of their qualifications. Then was it possible because the Hell Monarch came back from the nothingness? I didn't know the details. Maybe it was because he was already like a god himself, so his flesh was able to contain a god. But it wasn't clear. My heart trembled, and the aura around me increased. It was due to Gustarte and Diablo. They both had a serious resentment against Deathbringer. The feelings of anger came back. However, I remained calm. The odds weren't high if I attacked him from the front. Besides, this place was filled with enemies. It was a place where it wouldn't be easy to escape once the fight started. I asked the both of them if there was a way, and they whispered to me. There is a method. Chapter 238 to 240. System. Gustarte and Diablo's method was simple. The system, the best masterpiece created by the devil. It could destroy or cause a failure. The system was perfect and powerful enough to kill other gods. The devil was the best god. It was likely he was aiming for the gods from the beginning. Otherwise the devil wouldn't have built such a system. Saying in other words, there was a high probability that the system contained much of the god's personality or even his essence. If there was a problem with the system, then it would hinder his divinity. It was possible to win if I decreased his divinity a little bit. It would be like dealing with Gustarte, where the problem was finding the system. At the very least, it wasn't in the demon world. If it was in a new world, then I wouldn't be able to do anything. But my mind moved quickly. The first thing that popped up was the dark spirits. Even if they studied the crack, was it possible for them to enter the deepest part of the nothingness so early? I thought it was strange. The cracks had become bigger too quickly. Even if there were samples, the work had proceeded too radically. They had succeeded in cracking open the deepest part of the nothingness. I thought Deathbringer must have helped them. Perhaps there was another cause. I asked Gustarte and Diablo for comments. Then I nodded my head. It was a gamble. Go to the spirit world. I glanced at Deathbringer, who was wearing the mask of the Hell Monarch. He didn't look impatient at all. He appeared certain of his victory. He was confident that he could get rid of me at any time. I thought so as well. No matter how strong I wasn't a supreme god. I was convinced I could defeat the Hell Monarch, but it was a different story if the opponent was Deathbringer. He also knew that I was aware of the Hell Monarch's true identity. God's eyes. Nevertheless, I invoked God's eyes. I needed to make sure. The system was perfect. Even Deathbringer couldn't touch the system. If the status window appeared, it meant that Deathbringer wasn't free of the system. If it didn't, it meant he secured it so that his status window didn't appear. And just as I hoped, a window soon appeared. The power in the target doesn't allow God's eyes, demigod, to function. Name: Hell Monarch, Deathbringer. Occupation: Devil. Title: *Devil, God. *Supreme God, God. *Sublime Existence, God. *Ruler of Death, God. *Defiled Guardian, God. Stats: Strength, Intelligence, Agility, Stamina, Magic Power, Potential, Uniqueness. In a state of possession. However, the possession isn't complete yet. Skill: everything was filled with question marks. But it gave me some assurance against the devil. There were also the devil's additional titles. I couldn't see the status properly due to his power, but at least there was a status window. It was sufficient. Although everything was a question mark, the lines about the uniqueness appeared. I raised the Emperor's sword. The moonlight reflected off it and showed off a radiant beauty. It was originally the Hell Monarch's sword. One of his most loyal servants, Maxium, was in charge of this sword. Maxium acknowledged me as his emperor. He gave me this sword as proof. You are just a fake shadow. Deathbringer sneered at me. But I didn't stop talking. Do you hear this, heart? It was originally yours, but now it is completely mine. The underground world, the 100,000 phantom cavalry. You are just a fake self who failed to accomplish anything. I was taunting him. The possession wasn't complete yet. If the spirit of the Hell Monarch remained even a little bit, it would lead to extreme confusion. You are not the Hell Monarch. I am the Hell Monarch. My thoughts were soon proven to be correct. Kook, Deathbringer grabbed his head. This bastard, he glared at me with a pained expression. But he couldn't easily move. Attacking now could also be a method. However, I gave up as I saw him gradually regain stability. The Hell Monarch couldn't win against Deathbringer. There was only a little resistance. It wasn't much. His spirit would eventually be eaten away. His soul would fade away and his body would belong to Deathbringer. I deployed Chaotic Blade, KWA Kwang. My target wasn't Deathbringer. It was the dragon he was riding. The dragon screamed and Deathbringer fell to the ground. I put away my sword. If Deathbringer completely swallowed the Hell Monarch's spirit, then things would become harder. My actions would only buy a few days at most. In the meantime, I had to go to the spirit world to destroy the system. Deathbringer's condition wasn't normal, so there would be a problem with the enemy's advance. I spread my wings, and I quickly began to return. I had brought everything from the dungeons with me to the demon world. Among them were the items that I previously used to go to the spirit world. I immediately called Oswin. Oswin, who was busy making the mirror, immediately responded to my call. Oswin, can this device allow me to go to the spirit world? It is possible, but work as quickly as possible. I must go to the dark spirit world. A device to open a crack. The materials were enough and Oswin was skilled, so I believed he could do it quickly. It wasn't a recreation but just making use of what was already made. I understand. He didn't ask for the reason. Oswin left to work on the device and I heard a mosquito-like sound. Aster. It was Yihi. I frowned. Everything was moved except for the dungeon core. This was a completely different world, so I didn't understand how Yihi came along. Yihi was a fairy of the dungeon core. No, she wasn't. I had become the Demon King. Yihi should have become the ruler of the fairies, so it was right that she could throw away her constraints. But Yihi still belonged to the dungeon core. Was she rejected, or did she not have enough qualifications? How did you come to the demon world? Yihi, the power of love. Your job is over. You have an obligation to create a fairy world. Unlike the spirits, the fairies didn't have their own world. But it wasn't right that they disappeared. So the fairies hoped that a ruler would appear to make a world for them. The fairy ruler had that type of power. In fact, it was quite significant. Then Yihi spoke with a grouchy expression on her face. I don't know, but I felt like I had to come here. Yihi feels uneasy. The fairy ruler doesn't have the power of foresight. It's not like that. Can't Yihi just stay here? I touched my jaw. Yihi was now fully qualified to become ruler of the fairies. There was no harm in allowing her to stay here. Rather, she might be a great help in the war. After finishing my calculations, I opened my mouth. Help the other demons and creatures. Wah, is that so? Yihi. I knew Master would allow it. Juk. Yihi stopped looking so moody, kissed my cheek and flew off. It wasn't really obvious, but it seemed like Yihi had grown a little bit more. I was busy, but I strongly felt like I wouldn't see her for a long time. Immediately after Yihi left, I started thinking deeply. Spirit world. Frankly, it was a type of gamble. If the dark spirits didn't have the system, then I would suffer a great loss. The war would flow in an adverse way. I would have to face Deathbringer, who became perfect. I'm back. Soon Oswin came carrying the device. Is it possible? Yes. I'll run it right now. Please don't get lost. There was a high chance of getting lost when walking through the crack. In addition, the crack needed to be kept open, so I needed to return as soon as possible. If not, I might become lost in the crack and be destroyed by the presences in the nothingness. Once I was lost, my army wouldn't have the power to deal with the Hell Monarch. I'll go as quickly as possible. The crack was opened. I stepped into the crack. The spirit world was deserted. There were cracks everywhere and sounds of things being destroyed. The dark spirits were fighting with other spirits in numerous cracks. I looked into many of the cracks. Most of the spirit world was devastated. The elemental spirits were killed and the survivors obeyed the dark spirits. But there was still one place where a battle seemed to have been going on for a long time. The Fire King commands you. Burn them with hellfire. The Fire Spirit King Garish. He led the struggling fire spirits. The so-called strongest spirit in the spirit world was covered with wounds. The dark spirits used the power of the crack to relentlessly pursue him. I worried about it for a short moment. It was possible to enter the center of the dark spirit world. But in a situation where everything was uncertain, a person with information had considerable value. I have to ask about the situation. The Fire Spirit King Garish would know more about the dark spirits than anyone else. After making a decision, I quickly entered the crack connected with the fire spirit world. Waruruk. Pride's flames burned roughly and widely. They weren't lacking when compared to the flames of Garish the Fire Spirit King. Rather, my flames were even more powerful thanks to my high magic power. Chaotic Blade was then used and the dark spirits were cut like trash. All dark spirits, stop. I used true words. Once the power of my words manifested, the dark spirits couldn't move. They didn't seem to be protected by any power. Lightning God, jump out. I freely released Lightning God. The lightning roared and slaughtered the dark spirits. It took 10 minutes to clean up all the dark spirits fighting the fire spirits. It was an overwhelming victory. Many dark spirits came here, but there weren't any strong presences. And I was hunting my prey. After cleaning everything up, I approached Garish. It has been a while. It seems so. Garish nodded with a puzzled expression. There was a good reason. I was quite different from the last time he met me. It wasn't obvious, but Garish was a transcendent being. He could see a little bit of my essence. Garish glanced over my whole body and asked, "Are you really a demon? It isn't strange to call you a living god now. I'm trying to kill a god." Interesting. Very interesting. If I wasn't so busy then I might have joined you. Garish, do you want revenge on the dark spirits? I stared straight into Garish's eyes. More than half of the fire spirit world was broken. There were only a few spirits remaining, so the result was obvious. If the dark spirits invaded a few more times then they would be destroyed. It was impossible that Garish didn't know this. After seeing my strength, it was easy for Garish to choose. It was as good as placing himself below me. Garish smiled and spoke. What do you want? He was a reasonable king. He told me the story about the spirit world. Cracks opened and the dark spirits ambushed them. The plan of the dark spirits was amazing. The even more amazing thing was related to Adonis the Dark Spirit King. He broke the balance. Each spiritual world maintains a balance, but he became a madman caught up in destructive desires. If left alone, the spirit world, Garish sighed. The fire he exhaled from his whole body was intense but didn't contain any power. Is there anything else that is strange? Anything is fine. Garish nodded. Yes, we united. The surviving spirits joined forces and headed to the dark spirit world. And we were wiped out. I was the only one to come back. What happened? I don't know. Just, Adonis was impervious to any attacks. An impervious target couldn't be defeated. He seemed like a demigod. Garish's pride didn't allow him to call Adonis a god. Is that the end? You didn't see anything else? Anything else? Something strange. Let's see. I saw a door. Yes, it was a door. A giant door was floating in the sky. It was only a glimpse, but I definitely saw it. A door? The dark spirit world was a place that I knew. The auction was held several times in a castle in the center of the world. But I had never seen a door in the sky. If this door was new then it probably had something to do with the system. Anyway, that's all I can tell you. The dark spirits are strong, have a lot of numbers and Adonis is also powerful. Is there any way to beat them? You don't need to do anything. I spread my wings. If that was the whole story then it was good. I could move without worrying. Time was more important than anything else. If Deathbringer noticed that I was near the system in the dark spirit world, then he would come immediately. I didn't have a lot of time. Right now, the possession was incomplete so he had to concentrate on absorbing the Hell Monarch. You will handle it alone? Garish was filled with admiration. If I return then you will have to open your warehouse. If it depends on coming back, I understand. I will freely open the warehouse. Take what you want. Instead, get rid of those guys and come back. Garish had given up. It was originally meant to be a reward for returning the fire spirits, but the situation had changed. At first glance, he wanted to fight beside me. However, he was obliged to chase the remaining spirits. I headed back to the crack. Lightning quick. I couldn't give them time to notice and prepare something. Everything had to be resolved quickly. The dark spirits were originally merchants. They had raised their strength by relying on the points from the demons. In my previous life, they had waged a war for several decades. But now it took less than 10 years. What was the reason? The crack was just a crack. They might be able to save power through the crack, but it wasn't enough to deal with the whole spirit world so quickly. There had to be a reason why it was possible. The reason, it had to be the system. I entered the crack and emerged in the dark spirit world. I raised my speed so that the dark spirits wouldn't notice. There was no one here to stop me. There were some spirits, but they couldn't see me. In the demon world auction, the demons were overwhelmed because their strength was temporarily sealed by the devil's contract. In fact, the demon world was a much stronger existence. No matter how strong the dark spirits were, my eyes didn't pay attention to them. I only needed to pay attention to one presence. Adonis. My problem was Adonis. Garish mentioned it, but he must have the power of a demigod. Of course, that wasn't a problem, but he got rid of the limitations of a transcendent in a short time. It was a growth beyond common sense. Soon I reached the center of the dark spirit world. A huge castle, and a door floating in the sky. It wasn't detailed, but it definitely existed. My heart jumped. That door was the system. Gustarte, who lived in me, strongly agreed. However, the gate was blocked by numerous dark spirits. There were stairs leading into the sky with numerous castles all over the place. Any unauthorized people would be blocked. I won't be able to pass unnoticed. I scratched my cheek. I hadn't intended to move quietly in the first place. And I planned to catch Adonis. There was something I wanted from him. The 7 sins. I wanted all of the 7 sins items that he had. I had 3 and greed was an imitation. With the exception of greed, 3 more remained. I wondered what would happen if all of them were gathered. The Hell Monarch had thought it was good enough to kill a god. However, Oswin realized the danger and hid them in cracks. Shawaruruk. I woke up Lightning God. Lightning God sprang out. Let's give them a greeting. It was enough to lightly say hello. Lightning God moved through the dark spirits like they were a nuisance and assaulted a castle. And, Quarung. Kwakwa Kwang. The castle was instantly destroyed. Dark spirits were slaughtered. There were still some spirits alive, but I didn't care. They wouldn't be able to stand between me and my goal. The relationship between merchant and customer was entirely gone, and now we were complete enemies. I wasn't nice enough to show mercy to my enemies. I stepped on the dark spirits like they were ants. They couldn't exceed the wall between us. I didn't even need to use any power. I wondered how many I smashed. Randolph Brigzeal. I don't remember sending an invitation to you. Adonis. He appeared wearing a thick black cloak. The griffin feathered mask and ornaments seemed to have a legend rating. He was pretty fashionable for a dark spirit. Adonis. Give me the things left to you. Left? The rest of the 7 sins and that door. My finger pointed to the sky. A large door. The system was behind it. Adonis scoffed, and then he laughed. You don't have the strength. No, I am asking politely. I'll let you live if you give them to me. The dark spirits used whatever method they could to obtain goods for sale. I did the same. In addition, I had definite proof of a collusion with Deathbringer. It wasn't a lie when I said I would spare him if he gave them to me. It only applied to Adonis. I wouldn't necessarily spare the other dark spirits. Of course, Adonis wouldn't give them to me nicely. Despite getting power from somewhere, I will grant your wish to die. I didn't want information to be exchanged between Adonis and Deathbringer. Adonis wasn't able to predict just how strong I had become. The relationship itself between Deathbringer and Adonis was strange. Adonis was given the system while Deathbringer took over the Hell Monarch's body. Garish saw it. However, Adonis was unable to recognize the gap between us. If he did, then he wouldn't have come out like this. I'm glad that he is an idiot. I shrugged and grasped Wrath and the Emperor's sword. There was no need to use another skill against him. The moon was floating in the sky. Hyan Moon's swordsmanship is sufficient. I intended to shatter him with pure swordsmanship. I didn't use all of my magic power. Adonis wasn't my opponent in the first place. The attacks of the spirits didn't connect because he had a demigod-ranked skill. Elemental Shield, Demigod, was a skill that negated the attacks of the specified opponent. But it was no use in front of me. Even if he had a demigod-ranked skill, the difference between us was too large. All he had was a good weapon. He was also bad at using it. He failed to properly show off its efficiency. I understood all this when using God's eyes. God's Eyes was a skill that allowed me to see the status window of the opponent, although sometimes it could fail due to a difference in the defense skill, intelligence or magic power. It was the same for this. There was no elemental shield in front of such a difference in stat points. This, ridiculous? Adonis' eyes widened. He couldn't believe that there was such a huge gap. But he couldn't finish speaking. My swords sliced through Adonis. Quack. I shook my swords and looked around. There were numerous dark spirits surrounding me, but they were just staring blankly. I need to fulfill my promise to Garish. The dark spirits all committed the same sin. They destroyed the balance, so I would destroy all of them except for a few. Waruruk, Kururung, lightning god moved. Pride's flames wrapped around the dark spirits so that they couldn't escape. They were imprisoned, and their numbers sharply decreased in an instant. After stopping the attack, I headed to a trembling spirit. It was a stupid-looking spirit in the form of a kobold. What is your name? Snai? Hiccup. Sniffer. I nodded. Sniffer. From now on, you will be the leader of the surviving dark spirits. Hiccup. Yes, yes, leader Sniffer. Bring the rest of the 7 sins, or you will receive Adonis' fate. It was simply interpreted as death. Despite looking bamboozled, Sniffle nodded his head vigorously. Yes, yep. Sniffer ran off at his best speed. I didn't think he would run away. Then I looked at the handful of remaining spirits. The dark spirits were unable to move and just bowed. They had completely lost. You are defeated. I used the power of my words. It was to imprint the defeat into them. Thanks to the mercy of the winner, the balance of the spirit world was preserved. I had no obligation to maintain the balance, but the dark spirits might be helpful later. They had the ability to find excellent things. It wouldn't be bad to save a few to be used after everything was finished. Then, I moved my gaze. I looked at the giant door leading to the system. Adonis had placed some of the 7 sins up for auction. I had won everything, but I turned down a deal when Adonis offered it. There had been no way to obtain the other 4 items in the 7 sins set. Now I obtained all of it. One is missing: pride, greed, sloth, wrath, envy and lust. I had them all except for one. I couldn't see gluttony, but there was no need for gluttony. Infinite armor would play that role. Wrath was a sword. Pride was a pair of gloves. Sloth was a cloak. Greed was an armor as well as a pair of silver earrings. Lust was a belt and envy was a pair of shoes. Once all the 7 sins were worn, a strange power started fluctuating. You have worn all of the 7 sins. The skill, Power of Destruction, God, has been created. It is a skill that was made to kill a god. There is enough power to destroy a god's power. Power of Destruction? I formed tight fists. Personally, I wondered about how the Hell Monarch would kill a god. Now it seemed like they could fight on equal footing after a god's power was eliminated. I examined Power of Destruction. Soon the description appeared in front of me. Name: Power of Destruction, God. Description: permanently destroys one of a god's powers. Can't be duplicated on the same target. A skill that only exists for the destruction of a god. Every time it is used, one of the 7 sins must be sacrificed. 7 sevenths. Indeed. It could only be used 7 times, but that wasn't really a disadvantage. I was only dealing with Deathbringer. In other words, I could remove one of Deathbringer's most troublesome powers. It would be very advantageous in a fight if I used it correctly. It was clear that the Hell Monarch made this after knowing how difficult it was to go against a god. If he succeeded in being fully resurrected, if the Hell Monarch had successfully resurrected, then he might have really killed numerous gods. After gathering the 7 sins, I knew how strong the Hell Monarch's rage towards the gods was. I nodded and spread my wings. I achieved one goal and it was time to reach the finish. I quickly flew into the sky and stopped in front of a giant door. The system. I placed my hands on the door. And I pushed. Kuang. However, it didn't open easily. Is a key needed? I frowned. However, there was no such thing as a key. The presence of the key meant that it was possible for someone to manage it, which meant it was possible to manipulate the system. If no one could touch it, then there was no need to make a key. It was a system made by Deathbringer, so it was hard to imagine that someone could secretly enter. There had to be a way. Open. The power of words. It was able to influence a consciousness. It wasn't limited to living beings. There was some effect on inanimate objects. Checking divinity. Checking authority. System access has been given. That message suddenly emerged. I put aside my questions. Kuang. The door started to open with a huge sound. The inside of the door was bright. But there was nothing. It was a blank world. Is this the inside of the system? It was designed so that only a god, or someone with divinity, was permitted to enter. I didn't know what to do in this empty space. Gustarte didn't answer. It was the same for Diablo as well. They were also outsiders to the system. A set of related elements are combined according to certain laws in order to achieve necessary functions. Lexical meaning, positive, yet, the moment I had the thought, the answer appeared in front of me. I nodded. Now I knew what this space was for. It was a place that gave answers. This was a place that managed all the information. The game system was created here and Adonis learned a skill from it. I couldn't help wondering about something. Randolph Brigzeal. First of all, I wanted to see the conclusions about me. But was it because the amount of information was too big? This time it wasn't shown through words. Instead, something else appeared in front of me. Randolph Brigzeal. The video started from when I was born. I also had parents. There were no demons born without parents. This was the first time I saw those who gave birth to me. They were ordinary demons. They were demons who tried to escape from a war. They had laughed when their baby was born. However, their joy didn't last long. War was engulfing the entire demon world. There was no place for them to avoid it. In the aftermath of a war, they died. The baby persistently survived through other people. He was an experiment, someone's slave, a sword of war. The child grew stronger. He progressed alone and made his name known. They were my memories. I once again replayed the memories. It started from the moment I was born to shortly after I grew stronger. The time when I was a baby was brief, but it was both weird and amazing. It was like I really experienced the video playing. I felt their touches. I could feel the sensation of being a baby in my parents' arms for a while. I repeated it 5 times before shaking my head. My parents' faces were now imprinted in my brain, but I couldn't watch any longer. There was no point in holding on to the past. Even if I went back to the past, I would just be a newborn baby who couldn't do anything. A memory storage. That's right. This was a place where all the memories were stored. It wouldn't be strange to call it a repository of information. I know what to do. My role was to break this system. I pulled out a seed. It was similar to a human fetus, but very small. The seed of creation. The seed of creation was unknown. It was nothing but could give birth to something. Planting an unknown answer would destroy the system or cause a giant error. I placed the seed of creation on the floor. The seed immediately dug into the ground. End. Unknown. Error. Danger. Error. At that moment, the world turned black. Everything was words. The words, error, and danger, were repeated many times. I turned around without any fear. If I had a lot of time, then I could have found out more about the truths of the world, but I had an urgent task. Quarurung. Quang. Quang. The huge door started to crumble. The dark spirits' castles in the sky started disappearing. The system was crumbling. The divinity was spreading. The quality was something I could taste with my tongue. It was Deathbringer's divinity and I couldn't absorb it. As soon as the divinity scattered, it started slowly returning to Deathbringer. It is like this. Deathbringer's divinity was definitely exhausted. But if it all returned, then he would recover his strength at once. This was the time to fight. I needed to go back quickly. I robbed the warehouse containing the dark spirit's treasure. Then I headed to the fire spirit world through the open crack. Garish was at the entrance. He was watching the problems in the dark spirit world in real time. He stared at me with a look of amazement after I emerged. Did you do all of that? It wasn't difficult. How much time has passed? It has been 5 days. 5 days. I hadn't spent all that time catching Adonis. It seemed like the passage of time in the world of the system was different. It would have been bad if I spent more time in there. By now, the war should have started in the demon world. My mind became more urgent. Keep your promise, Garish. A promise is a promise. Okay, I will open the warehouse. Take whatever you want, Garish said in a pained tone. I had taken care of the dark spirits in the flash, giving me a high merit. I accepted the guidance of a spirit and headed to the warehouse. Then I opened my magic bag and swept in all the items I could use. There were a few legend-rated weapons. They will be helpful. I nodded. This would be a big help in the war. There would be a significant increase in power if a demon or creature used them. There isn't anything for me. I was a little sad. However, I soon forgot about it. The 7 sins was a 7-item set. I had no need for other items. After taking half of the huge warehouse, I exited. Are you going to kill a god? He remembered what I had said before heading to the dark spirit world. I responded lightly. That's right. Indeed, you do seem able to kill a god. Garish was convinced. To him, it seemed like I took care of the dark spirits in 5 days. In fact, Garish's eyes were shining. When your task is over, come back again. I want to maintain a strong relationship with you. Was there a reason to come back? Of course, I didn't know what could happen in the future. I nodded and turned away. The gamble was a success. The system in the dark spirit world was destroyed. Now that the system was destroyed, Deathbringer's divinity was scattered all over the place. Deathbringer definitely wouldn't be in a normal condition. I had to finish this before he recovered. A long time ago, he came to me with an offer about the game. I was willing to participate. However, Deathbringer saw all the participants as expendable from the start. We were used for the sake of an experiment. I didn't like that part. Even if he was a god, I wasn't his puppet. I was independent and nothing could control me. I needed to engrave this fact into his bones. I will be the last winner. Overturning the situation, now it was time for the final fight. The war started. The Hell Monarch commanded an army that was close to 5 million. On the other hand, the opposing side had less than 500,000. The numerical advantage wasn't something that could be easily reversed. Furthermore, the concept of demons fighting brutally was very rare. They were powerful beings that could destroy something in the blink of an eye. Shameful demons, you who have forgotten your souls. I, Ariel Diablo, will erase you today. Be aware of your own faults and die. She used an ivory sword and armor made from the bones of a Balrog. Hundreds of silver knights followed Ariel. Kung, Quarurum, a massacre. The war had already begun. Millions of demons and creatures collided with each other. The screams and blood didn't end. But Deathbringer's army was powerful. It wasn't simply due to numbers. Almost all the demons with noble titles were included. The ranks of demons were usually determined by force. They weren't going to be weak. Hold on until His Majesty comes back. Oswin also took part in the war. He fought more enthusiastically after confirming that it was the Hell Monarch who led the army. Quaduk, he greeted the enemy with more than 50 homunculi made by Gaparam. The homunculi were incredible. They grabbed the enemy's head and tore it off. There were struggles in other places. They protected the important points against the enemy who were pushing like a tsunami, and continued to fight. The giant mirror in the castle stopped the curse. And 100,000 soldiers were fiercely protecting the mirror. The enemies knew it as well. The enemies intensively targeted the mirror. They could prevent it for 1 day, but there was no time for a break. Their allies were rapidly decreasing and there were no signs that the enemies were being reduced. All that was left was defeat. Furthermore, the Hell Monarch hadn't taken part. They felt despair. However, they couldn't give up. And the second day, when the sun rose in the sky, the Hell Monarch appeared. Chapter 241. The Final Battle. The Hell Monarch coughed up blood. His body shook and he grinded his teeth together. Blood flowed from his eyes so he didn't look normal. Randolph? Brigzeal? His voice filled the battlefield. Just listening caused an eerie feeling to cover their bodies. The strong people instantly recognized that he was the Hell Monarch. It was the very last trial. They felt both hope and despair. The Hell Monarch raised his hands. Gradually, the power of destruction gathered around his hands. A mighty magic power. Dangerous. But it couldn't be avoided. As he reached out his hand, a purple sphere hit the ground. Kawang. The explosion couldn't be blocked. A storm erupted that touched everything. Destructive humanity. God. A power only for destruction. The high-ranking demons and creatures couldn't withstand the power. 30,000 creatures and demons died in an instant. Deathbringer looked on expressionlessly. Originally he should have been much stronger. The divinity locked in the system was scattered so he was weakened. He looked at the castle that he wanted to crush in his fist. No matter how much he was weakened, he was still Deathbringer. A devil. Getting rid of the huge castle wasn't his job. A mortal cannot overcome an immortal. I am the devil Deathbringer. Do you dare go against a god? He once again reached out. A multitude of hands stretched out from the earth. The hands grabbed the 30,000 corpses on the ground and made a huge doll. Quirk, Quaruruk. The 30,000 corpses combined to form a monster over 100 meters tall. This was the result of properly combining his powers and skills. The monster was ignorant, however, it was strong. The place that the monster swept through didn't have any bodies remaining. Deathbringer didn't distinguish between friend and foe. I will kill all of you in the end. Before that, I will get rid of everything. He declared, words containing divinity. He infused his words with his strength, in order to ensure that he kept the promise. The Balrog Rogujan, Adonis of the Dark Spirits. I couldn't deny that they were strong, but they were lacking compared to me. It meant that absolute robbery would have no effect. Of course, it would be a different story if they had a power like Camiel's, but they didn't. Adonis. He got into the system and obtained Elemental Shield. The system gave him a way to achieve it, but that wasn't enough to call it a power. He couldn't even use Elemental Shield properly. He was stunned by the sudden power I had and stopped thinking. Absorbing the two of them wouldn't make me stronger. And absolute robbery seemed to have a limit on the number of times it could be used. I can't absorb more than 5. At first, I thought it was the amount of magic power. But when I used it several times, I realized there was a limit on the number of things I could absorb. It depended on my ability and it seemed like there were approximately 5 times left. Anyway, I was looking forward to it. What would happen if I absorbed Deathbringer? After all, Deathbringer was a devil and god, even if he lost his divinity. A supreme god, he was likely to have a similar or even greater strength than me. Although I had the same divinity as a living god, it was difficult to imagine stealing divinity from Deathbringer. Becoming stronger was always enjoyable, and I heard from Yihi that he had started a massive attack. If he attacked, then it is natural to receive it. Survival was in my nature. As soon as I returned through the crack, I took out all the weapons I brought. There were hundreds of epic rated items piled up. The unique rated items also numbered over 1,000. Give them to those who need them. Yes, master. Yihi instantly obeyed my command. The state of the castle was the worst. Thanks to the constant retreat and pushing back, the condition of their equipment was terrible. The craftsmen could repair the tools, but the story was different on the battlefield. If 2 people had similar skills, the one with better equipment would win. This could mean the difference in winning on the battlefield. Changing their equipment could increase the skills of quite a few demons. This was the castle that Ariel Diablo ruled over, so they were quite well organized. I left the work in the castle to Yihi. I immediately checked the status of the battlefield. I clicked my tongue lightly. The worst. It hadn't been long since the Hell Monarch's attacks began. But there were devastating traces all over the place. Bodies of both enemies and allies were piled up. Even so, the number of my allies was noticeably reduced. There aren't even 200,000 troops remaining. I swept my gaze over the battlefield calmly. After a lot of struggle, they had reduced the opposing side, but there were still 3 million remaining. It was a situation where my side was enclosed in a narrow place. They wouldn't be able to last much longer. If only one road was open, then the rest would be easy. They would be annihilated in the blink of an eye. Plus, I moved my gaze. The highest place, Deathbringer, in the guise of the Hell Monarch, was gathering energy of destruction. The energy was the size of an adult male, but the magic power coming from it was tremendous. He is aiming to wipe out everything. I understood it immediately. This was Deathbringer's power. The power of a god. Among them, Deathbringer had the most destructive energy. Could I block it? I shook my head. I couldn't block it. Although I could interfere, I couldn't prevent the destruction energy from touching the ground. I would have to use a god power and I only had 2. Reverse World and True Words. Neither of them were offensive powers. I can't do it. If that hit, then the castle would collapse. Was it just the castle? Every creature nearby would collapse. He wouldn't have 2 similar powers. My worry was short-lived. I unfastened the earrings. I held them in my hands and said, "Power of destruction." Quack. White light emerged from the earrings. The light swallowed my intended target, Deathbringer. Then his expression stiffened. A message isn't popping up. Maybe it is because the system collapsed. The system normally gave me a choice of what to do. I just followed it, but now that the system had crashed, I needed to manipulate it on my own. 5 colors emerged from the earrings. Black, purple, vermilion, red and blue. It meant I could eliminate one of them. I chose purple. My hands touched it. Swiak. At that moment, Deathbringer's destructive aura disappeared. The earrings also evaporated. Now there are 4 powers left. I nodded. Power of destruction wasn't a skill that only destroyed powers. It also allowed me to confirm how many powers the opponent had. 5 lights appeared and one of them had been destroyed. Now there were 4 powers remaining. The Hell Monarch made something good. I shrugged and glanced at Deathbringer. He was currently trapped in the body of the Hell Monarch. He wouldn't be able to escape from the Hell Monarch's body until his divinity returned. So if the Hell Monarch was killed, he would also die. It was the end after being destroyed. Randolph Brigzeal, he felt one of his powers disappearing. Deathbringer's body trembled. Was it because his divinity had fallen greatly? The expressions on his face were intense. Somehow he didn't seem like the devil. He was significantly different from the first time I saw him in the demon world. I can do it. There was a mocking smile on my face. He might be feeling furious, but I was happy. I had removed one of his strongest powers, so I moved over there. There would be a lot of damage in my fight with Deathbringer, so it would likely be disadvantageous to my demons and creatures. At first, he ignored me and killed my soldiers. However, he had now become hostile towards me. Once he became angry, I needed to move. Heeing. I used Chaotic Blade on Wrath and the Emperor's Sword. Pong. I kicked the air. I folded my wings and flew as fast as possible towards Deathbringer. Quang. A blue barrier blocked my swords. It wasn't a shield made using magic power. This is a god power. The power to form a protective barrier. I suddenly thought of Camael. It was an annoying power like his. But Deathbringer shouldn't have a defensive power. Gustarte and Diablo also laughed. Then, this power originally belongs to the Hell Monarch. Guardian's power. It was a power that used the fate of those they guarded, keeping the user in a near-invincible state. In contrast, the opponent wouldn't be able to exert their strength. Jejuk. Jijijuk. The shield that received my sword was broken. Deathbringer had no need for defenses. He was a solitary being. On the contrary, I was protecting many. At the very least, I had to protect the soldiers following me. That was the responsibility of the Demon King. Guardian's power was useless in front of me. I had a lot more to protect than Deathbringer. There are 3 powers remaining. Quang. Quang. I wielded my swords in rapid succession. Every time, Deathbringer reached out and blocked my swords. Huge shock waves kept on being created as I moved sideways. A wide valley. Deathbringer opened his arms. Soon, a red energy wrapped around the whole valley. This was also a power. It was a great power that dominated this space. I frowned. From the moment I entered this space, I could tell that my stats had fallen. Absolute domination. I confronted it with my own power. Diablo's voice rang out. The red magic power that Deathbringer used was absolute domination. I had a similar power and could defend myself with my spirit. It was similar to the power of true words. I wouldn't allow it to dominate me. Overlapping was possible. Deathbringer, I am impervious to your power. I said with all my will. Jajang. Soon, the red magic power broke like a mirror. Indeed, now he is a demigod. It wouldn't have been easy if Deathbringer had his original divinity. Even with the same power, there was a clear difference between users. However, his system was broken and his divinity barely survived. Deathbringer's expression was stiff. He was a god from birth. He had never experienced a situation like this before. I was a mortal demon. But I wasn't a mere demon. I also possessed divinity. I had absorbed Gustart's powers and inherited the power of Diablo, the origin demon king. I had surpassed normal mortals a long time ago. A mortal subject? Is this creature trying to transcend your creator? Deathbringer was filled with a torrent of emotion. A god was originally a perfect being. They didn't express emotions to this extent. Now I was sure of it. He was a fallen god. It was right to call him a demigod. The boundaries between immortal and immortal were disturbed. Due to the incomplete possession, he might have integrated with the Hell Monarch. This was the Hell Monarch's anger. His despair was felt by Deathbringer. These wretched words. The Hell Monarch had wanted to kill a god. I didn't care, but I wouldn't ruin this game. I couldn't show him a big mistake that he would target. There were 2 powers remaining. But I didn't care much. Deathbringer. Now I will finish this. Pride's Flames. Lightning God. Chaotic Blade. I used every attack skill at the same time. If I killed him, then the army attacking the castle would also be destroyed. They existed due to his skill. Deathbringer's expression changed. As I moved in, he smiled. And, come, you won't be able to avoid this. He raised his hands. Then he pointed towards me. The real power of the devil isn't something you can offset with your mind. I am the creator and I have power over all my creatures. According to my authority, I will erase you now. Deathbringer was the devil, a demon and a god, and I was part of the species that he created. He opened his mouth and declared, "Death." No other words were required. One of his remaining 2 powers was revealed. However, it felt different from any power he had used before. A specified task, his greatest power. It was a proclamation of death towards the opponent. As soon as Deathbringer said the word, death, the world around me changed. It was black and I couldn't see anything. But I didn't die right away. Kakook, my body wasn't listening to me. My hands moved to choke my own neck. Even so, I was able to resist thanks to my high intelligence. Kuuong. I fell from the sky and crashed into the ground. In this state, my body twisted around on the ground. My remaining stat points. I gritted my teeth. I had to hang in there. I instinctively realized that raising my intelligence was the only way to stop this power. In order to do this, I had to use my remaining stat points. But how? The system had crashed, so I didn't know how to raise it. Master. At that moment, I heard Yi's voice from above me. A hallucination? Deathbringer's power enclosed me in another space. I had felt my soul connection with Yi be forcibly disconnected. I am a living dungeon core. The core is part of the system. Hurry and touch Yi. My vision was tinged with darkness. I couldn't see anything. I only felt death slowly approaching. But I reached out. Soon someone touched my hand. System resume rate 0.001%. Unable to recover. Status window, recovery complete. Name. Randolph Brigzeal. Occupation Demon King. Dungeon Master, title * Dungeon Hunter. Residual stats +1 when occupying dungeons and hunting demons. * Indomitable Warrior, XU, all stats +2. * first to receive a fairy's blessing. U, magic power +6. * Origin Master, Epic, all stats +3. * Undead, XU, intelligence and stamina +5. * Ruler of the Underground World. Legend, all stats +5. The rating of all skills below epic grade +0.5. * Origin Demon King, God, all stats +10, grants a transcendent rank. Stats, Strength 130, +30. Intelligence 149, +25. Agility 125, +30. Stamina 145, +32. Magic power 142, +26. Potential 691 +143. Remaining stat points 47. Electric power 742 gigawatts. Uniqueness. The master of the underground world. The heart of the Hell Monarch has completely awakened. Has a strong divinity for some reason. Inherited the power of Diablo, the origin Demon King. Skill. Combine everything, XU, God's Eye, Demigod, Dark Sword, Epic, Divine Sword Unity. Epic, passive, Lightning Elemental, Epic. Pride, Epic, Corruption. Legend, Power of Domination, Epic, passive, Spirit Communication. Epic, passive, Reverse World. God. True Words. God. Passive, Absolute Robbery. Demigod. Chaotic Blade. Legend, Power of Destruction, God. Skill and item effects. Wrath, Strength +7, Sloth, Agility +7. Pride, Stamina +7. Divine Sword Unity. Strength and Agility +3. Through the darkness, some words appeared in front of me. I bit my lip hard enough to make it bleed and put all my remaining points into intelligence. My intelligence reached 221, well over 200 points. The skill, Aegis Shield, God, has been created. Having more than 200 intelligence was no different from having a power. Once Aegis Shield was created, the darkness that stained my surroundings quickly faded. The world regained its original shape and I could barely open my eyes. However, a sight I couldn't easily understand was right before my eyes. A fairy dares interfere with my work? You deserve to die. Deathbringer's hand had pierced through Yi's chest. Yi had a spirit body. But Deathbringer had the power to tear apart a spirit. His strength was in the realm of a god. It was impossible for her to deal with Deathbringer, even if she became the fairy ruler. At the same time, Yi gradually became dim. I was silent. Then Yi stared at me and gave a small laugh. Master, Yi, did I do well? Yi playfully bowed, and she was gone in a puff of white smoke. My face became hard. My mouth opened slightly, but that was it. I couldn't think of anything to say. This was the second time I had seen Yi die. She had died twice on my behalf. She never resented me. Yi originally should have left to become the fairy queen. The contract between us should have been terminated at this point. She would build her own world out of the core. Despite having such an important mission, Yi had continued to belong to the core. She felt uneasy and continued to watch over me. Hello, Dungeon Master. I am the Dungeon Master's companion fairy, Yi. Yi. Wah, Master is amazing. Mind reading. Yi was really wrong. Yi should have been careful until the end. Please forgive me, Master. Hying. Master, NN. Don't die and leave Yi. In retrospect, Yi had only caused me trouble. She didn't always do what I told her to. Her love for bees was enough to make a secret garden. Sometimes she showed amazing creativity and did something unexpected. Therefore, I stayed quiet when she was helpful. However, despite this, I always kept Yi by my side. Yi never betrayed me. Even in my previous life, she was always laughing no matter how hard it was. That attitude didn't change even when she died on my behalf. But, this was the end. I didn't have the ability to turn back time. It was impossible to turn back the time once it was already turned. I was sure because I realized some truths of the world after gaining divinity. It meant I couldn't see that light anymore. Do you have the power of Aegis? It is still useless. A mortal wouldn't be able to properly handle that power. Deathbringer mocked quietly. I stared at him. You shall die. And I declared. The power of death contained a transcendent will that couldn't be stopped. Never, he absolutely could never survive this place. Epilogue. I plundered Deathbringer's powers after he died. The already dead enemies collapsed as my remaining troops cheered at the victory. We had won. I won a great victory against the devil. We cleared up the bodies and prepared funerals. After that, a huge party was held for everyone to celebrate the victory. I was at the center of the victory. I killed a devil. He was known as the Hell Monarch, but everyone here knew. I killed him and now there was no one to stop me in the demon world. I was the absolute. I was king of the demon world. In the name of the king, I promised to devote myself to the restoration of the demon world. At the same time, a ceremony was held for the birth of a new demon king. Demons who survived by hiding came out one by one. A huge crowd gathered in front of the castle. All the demons in the demon world had come. They didn't know the new demon king. The ruler who would govern over them for a long time had the name of Randolph Brigzeal. After the banquet was over, I entered the demon king's room alone. The surrounding area was dark and silent. Duck, duck, my footsteps echoed in the room. I slowly climbed the stairs. There was a big chair at the top of dozens of stairs. It was made from bones of dragons and balrogs, and only the demon king was allowed to sit on it. I sat down on the throne. I slid in and tilted my head backwards. I took a deep breath. It was a long journey. I had finally become the demon king and sat in this chair like I wanted. I slowly closed my eyes. Soon, I fell into a deep sleep. It was the first restful sleep after a long time. The survivors on Earth quickly regained the glory of the past. The demons were no longer threatening humanity. Only the dungeons and creatures remained. But there were changes. First, the sky changed. A huge black door was located in the sky. It was a place that couldn't be reached by plane or jet. It was a territory that no one could reach. However, they were sure that door was connected to the world of the demons. No one attempted to reach it by force. And the dungeon in Korea regained its original appearance. It became slightly bigger. The dungeon reached into the sky. To be exact, it touched the black door in the sky. It was like a place connected with the door. The surviving creatures transformed and quickly increased their numbers in the dungeons. As they grew, monster waves began again. The awakened stuck together and endured the crisis well. It was easy because the creatures that exited the dungeons weren't very strong. As time passed, the awakened were divided into two large groups. The guardians of humanity, and the hunters climbing the dungeons. They were dungeon hunters. Nuna, watch out, Edward exclaimed. He covered Yoon-Hai's back and struck a creature with his sword. Kuik, the creature was split in two. The creature screamed. Edward sighed as the danger disappeared. Phew, really, until the end, aren't you too clumsy? Edward sighed. Then Yoon-Hai laughed playfully. Aren't you guarding my back? You should still be careful. I might not always be able to save you. Aren't you the strongest awakened? Those are just words. Edward shook his head. In the meantime, Kim Yura and Kim Min-ji commenced their treatments. Suture. Healing. The injuries on the awakened were healed in an instant. It wasn't strange to call it an amazing ability. Yoon-Hai clicked her tongue despite seeing it a few times already. We wouldn't have come this far if it wasn't for the two of you. Thank you. Of course we have to do this. Kim Yura laughed. Just 3 years ago, her expression had always been dark. But 3 years after the transformation of the dungeon, she had recovered much of her bright self. By the way, how many floors are there? This is already the 54th floor. Yoon-Hai asked with a pout. Yoon-Hai was an awakened who hunted dungeons. She had already conquered several dungeons. After a long trial and error, she was finally attempting to conquer the highest dungeon that was located in Korea. But it wasn't finished yet. What dungeon would be safe from Nuna? Just take it easy. It will soon come to an end. Edward responded like he didn't care. So Yoon-Hai had to believe it. What will be here? I will be bored if it is just a dungeon core. This is Korea's dungeon. The Demon King's dungeon. This is already the 8th challenge. Isn't it obviously connected to the door in the sky? Won't the world where the demons live be on the other side of the door? Yes, but don't think about entering. We will check the risks. It is our job to confirm the chances of the demons returning. In other words, the dungeon hunters acted as scouts. Only confirming. Ah, really? Don't think otherwise. Just thinking of that time still makes me angry. He was referring to Greenwich Observatory. Edward became agitated just thinking of that time. What? Didn't you kill a lot of demons thanks to me? Don't you know how dangerous it was? And you went back to save the Demon King? So where is the Demon King now? Up there. Yoon-Hai pointed to the sky. Yes, he went back to his world. So forget that bastard. I've forgotten everything. There will be punishment if you are lying. Really? The two of them started arguing. Kim Yura laughed. Kim Min-ji had a small smile on her face. Even though time has passed, they are still the same. Kim Min-ji nodded. No matter how much older or stronger they became, Yoon-Hai and Edward remained unchanged. They never backed down and had a firm belief. Kim Yura had a lot of faith in them. That wasn't all. Heavens Will became the world's strongest guild, filled with the best dungeon hunters. They were the last pioneers of the era of the demons. They were named protectors, but those who remained outside the dungeons were merely involved in the confrontation with the creatures. But Heavens Will didn't give up. They continued adventuring in the dungeons. If they found treasures, then they handed them to those who had fallen on hard times. In addition, all the cores they obtained were used for the development of new energy technologies. Thanks to that, the world had many energy innovations. With a little more time, everyone could hopefully see the glory of the past. Some people expressed concerns. The dungeons changing, the door in the sky. They were anxious about the demons coming back. Heaven Will move to resolve this anxiety. They would be the light of hope to humanity. So far, they had been completing that role well. And there was no doubt that they would continue to do well in the future. As long as both of them are here, they were the strongest combination. Humanity's strongest awakened and the closest to the Demon King. Kim Yura and Kim Min-ji were praised as the saintesses, but they were lacking compared to those two. At that time, Kim Yura remembered one person. Demon King, Randolph Briggseel. That name still caused fear in Kim Yura's mind. However, she knew that his actions played a major role in saving humanity. If it wasn't for him, humanity would have perished. As of now, the two of them still hadn't stopped arguing. Stop fighting. The creatures will hear you and come flocking, Kim Yura exclaimed. Yoon Hai promptly responded. I'd like that, Nuna. Really, phew. Edward shook his head. The Korean dungeon core shone. Originally, it would never have lit up again. The fairy disappeared, so the light of the dungeon core should have been lost forever. Yet, it shone. This meant that the fairy hadn't been destroyed. I told Chrisley, find out, even if you need to walk through the whole world. I ordered. According to my command, millions of demons moved. Millions of demons started to search the world. A small pond with no name. The width was 10 meters. It wasn't shallow or deep. It was just an ordinary pond. I stood near the pond and stared quietly into the water. You were here. I opened my mouth. There was a seed of a fairy. It hadn't bloomed yet. A fairy was born when someone gave it a name. If it wasn't for God's eyes, then I would have walked straight past it. But I was confident about who the fairy seed was. Your name is Yihi. Yihi, who likes laughing like Yihi. It is really important that you laugh in a silly manner. I carefully reached out and touched the seed. You will be the queen of the fairies. Your mission couldn't be completed due to me. The fairy world controlled by you will be quite fun. I carefully removed my hand. The seed was in the pond. If it left the pond or the pond disappeared, then the seed couldn't bloom. It would disappear forever. However, it took a very long time for a fairy to bloom from a seed. It wasn't 100 or 200 years. It wasn't even 1,000 years. Maybe an even longer time was required. I had to keep this pond safe until then. The pond was too small. The environment didn't seem good either. I spoke to the person behind me without turning around. Move the Demon King's castle here. Place my throne closest to the pond. I will follow your words. My Demon King. It was Chrisley. She happily obeyed my command. I was the Demon King. I gained my position by killing Deathbringer. Every word had been turned into a reality. It was the same for moving the Demon King's castle. But time was needed. I looked around and cut down some trees. A chair made of wood was created. At first glance, it looked like the throne of the Demon King. However, the raw material was only wood. Once I couldn't see any more lumps, I placed the chair next to the pond and sat down. Ha ha, I laughed out loud. Ha ha ha, now I had truly achieved my dream. TL. It is the end. Thank you for everyone who stuck around to the end. I know that some of you might think the ending is rushed and the author wrote a short note after completing the series explaining this. I will summarize the main parts below. Author's note. Thank you for reading. First of all, you will feel that the last part of Dungeon Hunter is somewhat fast. For example, there was a fight scene that ended too quickly. There are some parts that aren't done well, so I apologize. Originally, I planned to have 270 chapters, but that ended up decreasing by 28 chapters. My intention to finish the novel was too strong. The hard work and stress took a toll on my body, so I went for a checkup at the hospital. I also didn't have a big stockpile. Once I started to write it all down, I didn't write it well. Just typing on the keyboard caused my heart to beat rapidly and I kept on getting the sweats. I know it isn't a satisfactory result for everyone, but I am very thankful if you read it in a good way. In my next work, I will try to have more of a stockpile and look after my health.